Oh, here we go. Starting with a huge sigh. Hmm, how are you doing? I hope you're well. I have to make it a habit to ask you, just to appear polite to you. But no, really. I'm trying to develop. I'm trying to develop like good girl streamer vibes. I'm gonna fail, but I'm trying. So I had to ask you how you are, and that's why I had to sigh because it was like, my God, I have to be nice to these people. Just kidding. I sighed out of relief, basically, but nothing to do with like anything that you know about. I'm just thinking stuff. Anyway, that aside, the intro was from White Bat Audio. Uh, see, see, I'm trying to like to give credit to be nice, all that stuff, right? Um, and today, wow, that sounds so official. Today we will talk about but like no, for real. Today I'm gonna talk about, or I want to watch a video and talk about Ultima Online. You know what Ultima Online is? What you always? It's a very old MMO, which literally left its mark on me for like 16, no, 17 years. And yeah, so as such, it's an important bit of my gaming life, I would say. My first proper MMO as well, and that of several friends of mine, since I kind of like got them into it, um, just by just by letting them like play on my account for a bit. So I wanted to start. I wanted to start by sharing my own experiences with the game. That's one option, or we can watch the video first, and then I can comment on it and shit. Like just pause and comment as I usually do. And then at the end share my own experiences with it. But yeah, I'm not decided. I'm not decided. I might just share a few quick things now, and then as we go, maybe I'll remember some stuff. But before we go on with that, and with a sound check, as I like to call it, um, yeah, NerdSlayer Studios. Listen, I like their videos. I enjoy their videos. There's been some controversy at one point, I think 2 months ago, 3, 4, 5 months, I don't even remember. Um, but I'm not here for that. I'm just clearly here only for the video and the contents of the video, right? And Ultima Online. And to see like what happened to this game. Um, I did always kind of check up on it now and then, but nothing serious. And so seeing this in my feed, I was like, no, what happened to it? Because it was kind of existing, and yeah, I don't know. Sad. If it's dead and they pull the plug, I'm gonna be sad, honestly. Um, but um, yeah, who knows? So, um, so what happened is with me basically. Um, I had two friends. They were brothers, Alex and George, and they introduced me to Diablo 1 at one point, and we would like get together. We would get some snacks or whatever at their place. We would sit in front of the PC and we would spend cold and scary nights playing Diablo 1, watching Alex basically play a sorcerer. And we were like, huddling together and going like, oh, this is so scary. We were very young, I have to tell you, and very easily impressionable, and into horror movies and everything. So it was like, yeah, it was very nerdy and very nice to do. And yeah, we would do this like late night on purpose. And that's important because at one point Alex said, there's this. Alex was an Ultima fan, was a huge Ultima fan. He was the oldest among us, and among the three of us. And anyway, he was a huge Ultima fan, and at one point he said, while we were playing Diablo, and after we had played it like for I don't know a few days, he was like, there's also this other thing, which is an Ultima game, but it's like BattleNet, because we were aware of what BattleNet is roughly, um, and for us it was huge, completely huge as a concept, like that you can be in what felt like was um, felt like the definition of an MMO, let's say, which we had no concept of the word, by the way. But to us, it felt like, oh yeah, there are people playing, and you can go in and play with them. That's like crazy, absolutely crazy. And of course, we couldn't access BattleNet because, uh, you know, that particular copy of the game may have not been legal. All right, and I'm not taking responsibility for any of that. Um, as it technically also wasn't my copy. But we couldn't access it, but we knew about it, and we were like, oh, that would be, that sounds great. And then, yeah, as I said, like Alex said, yeah, there's this thing, this Ultima Online, and it's like Ultima, but it's online. And I was like, what do you mean it's online? And we started talking about it, and then I understood what Alex was saying, and I was like, whoa, it how? Like, I have to experience this. This is crazy. Like you mean I can make a character like like I make a character, I'm the character? And Alex was like, yes, yeah, you can select your hair, and you can select like, this and that. And I was like, oh, whoa. I was immediately sold on that shit. So I went and bought it like literally the next day, and I started playing. And from there, holy shit, it was fucking wildfire. Um, some other friends later, I moved afterwards, of course. Alex was sharing an account with his two brothers, Bill and George, as I said, um, which kind of sucked, but whatever. Anyway, eventually moved from that area, and I moved to the general suburbs area that I live now. Um, and there I kind of like talked to maybe three people total or something at the time, and they had no idea what the fuck that was or what an MMO is. And then I showed them, and then they showed others. And at one point, we were like 8 to 11 people, I think, who were just playing Ultima. Not necessarily together all the time or even together at all, but they heard it from, people that heard it from me, for example. It had reached a point where later on, uh, later on, people would, for some reason, kind of like see me as the go-to person for whatever matter they had faced in the game. So I would even have like, I had once a person just walk up to me and be like, "We heard that you're playing this game and that you introduced others to it," and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah. Are you talking about like Ultima?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure. Um, can we start it?" Like, and it was like, it was kind of crazy, honestly. I'm not even gonna lie. It was kind of like huge for some reason. It just became huge through that. Um, Within like my acquaintances, let's say, because I wasn't friends with all of those guys. Um, and it also led to a point where that Ultima connected us, some of us, Um, eventually, even later on, we were like what, 4 or 5 people who were literally, we were feeling literally like we're super special because we are all like playing the game and we're in the guild and we can just talk about it in front of others and make them feel left out. Which was evil, granted, but like, yeah, come on. It was like you were the kids with the cool toys, You were the cool toy gang. Except it wasn't a toy, it was a PC game. And Oh boy, the things that we did, because we eventually also kind of like started playing together. Even up to the point where I would have like four PCs in my house, and we would organize like stayovers just to play Ultima and other games sometimes, but like Rainbow Six back then, or an earlier tournament, or Counter Strike, AVP one, like shit like that. But it was mostly Ultima was like chief among those things. People I knew, like Theo, Jim Lawrence, for example, and Vagelis, they would stop by my house, even fucking uninvited or unannounced, would knock on my fucking blinders, and they would be like, "Hey, can I come in?" And they knew that if there was a PC spot open, only four PCs, they could just hang out and play. Just log in and play and share my connection. I think at the time, barring Lawrence, I had like the fastest connection available that I knew list, and so that was happening. And then later also Vagelis did the same. He had three PCs at his place, and so his tighter group friend also started playing Ultima and just like LANing in his house. Like it became a whole thing. Eventually, we also even did like an event where we brought all our PCs in Vagelis' place, and it was like fucking 8 PCs there. And we had arranged it, like Vagelis had arranged it with his parents as well. Like, people are gonna come over. Like, we did some very interesting things, honestly. And yeah, just it all started from fucking Ultima. Not gonna lie. I'm not gonna fucking lie. I remember being in a group of like, what, 10 people, 9 people, all of us at a cafe, which was a metal cafe, by the way. And that's where all the cool kids from the suburbs here would hang out. It was called the Fireplace, the direct translation. So it's actually called the Fireplace, Jackie in Greek. It was a metalhead place, and we would be sitting there bragging for what we did in Ultima, like how strong we are, all that shit, like that we own a house now, and shit like that. So I'm trying to say there was a whole fucking culture around it at this point, like a microculture that somehow like developed. Uh, BRB as well, really quick, and then I'll continue. One sec. Sorry for that. Okay. So yeah, there was this like this mini culture, let's say, that developed from it, and it lasted for a very long time. I was among the people that actually tried the game and played it, which at that point had reached like a very silly number, more than 15, I think, people. Friends, and blah blah blah, all of that shit. I was the last who kept playing. Everybody else moved on to World of Warcraft or Lineage 2 or other shit like that. I kept playing Ultima for a very long time actually. Hence, the 17 years. I Lots of things happened. It's not just that it created this mini culture among my acquaintance group, let's say, and schoolmates. It's also what happened in the game that was quite like, I don't know, memorable, I would say. Um, I remember I remember getting our first house and then, putting it somewhere and then going like, okay, we have to carry a key with us because, housing worked very different than you would imagine today. It was, so first of all, Ultima had no instances. no loading screens. Everything was like open completely. And housing wasn't an exception. As long as you could fit the house plot um, to a space in the game, you could build your house there. That's it. And access to it was always public. There were no safety or settings. There was nothing. It was just a key and the door. So whoever had the key could unlock or lock the door, which meant that like people could not go in. But if you died and somebody took your key, well, if they had a faint idea of where it might be, they could just go and like open it and loot everything. And I have a memory of which I didn't experience myself, but like I think that before it was changed, thieves could in fact lockpick houses. But I think that changed pretty quickly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember. I think I remember that was the case for a very little while, and then people like complained or something, and then you couldn't do it anymore. But thieves could actually steal from other players, and they could steal their keys. And the thing is, if they would see a rune in your backpack, so runes for context, you would mark an area using a rune and a mark scroll, or if you were a mage, obviously you would do it otherwise, more easily. But if you weren't a mage, which I wasn't, you could use a mark scroll on a rune at a location, and then use a recall scroll on the rune to teleport back to that location at any point. So let's say that you had your keys on you and you also had a rune. Well, you can bet your ass that the thief would steal the rune as well. And then they would check immediately if that's where your place is. And the only defense to that was basically, which wasn't even a defense basically, was to mark your rune not exactly at your house, but somewhere where you could recognize the area and say, like, okay, it's south from here, you know. And the farther the better. But that was an inconvenience in general. Anyway, over the years, a lot of things changed when it comes to like that kind of system. Honestly, but back when I played first, it was everything was free real estate. Like everything was literally exploitable to fucking high heaven. You have no idea. And yeah, as I said, like the housing system was no exception. And so we did put some stuff in our house, and I think one day one of us forgot to lock the door, and some random person walked in and like took everything. And then we just like when we logged in, we just like I think I was the one or somebody at my place at the time. I was like, "Hey, why could I open the door immediately without you unlocking?" And I was like, "What?" And then we realized that we had been hit by a smooth criminal who also left a book because you could leave items on the floor, right? And in the house they would not decay. Out in the open they would eventually decay, but in the house they wouldn't decay. So thieves would usually leave a thief mark, like a book, because you could get books from NPCs and then write into them. So they would leave a book as a calling card, like like oh, thanks for the loot, noobs, you know, signed whatever, like the player name, and it was pretty crazy. And yeah, we done that, which like it almost made us high because back then to raise that kind of money it was like insanely difficult, and I think we also raised that money through not necessarily legitimate means, as in we were. I mean, let's face it, we were mostly into player killing. From a point on, we were mostly into player killing. So basically, ganking, as they would call it. So being the three, four, or five of us, and then luring somebody. There's a funny story about that too, and then killing them, and then taking their stuff. And I think eventually we just like sold enough stuff and like, you know, had enough gold to actually buy that house. And I think that's how we did our first house. Um, there was also like some other fuckery that went on. I remember I remember returning before it was looted empty. I remember we used to drop our loot there from our kills, right? And before we got hit by that smooth criminal anyway, we got hit by something else, which was people got wind of us, like luring people and murdering them in the forest next to Britain, I think was the main town there, or Trinsic. I think it was Britain. Um, and they employed thieves, so people were stealthing while we were killing like our victim. And when we opened a moon gate, which led directly into our house, they stepped in, but they did nothing. They just stayed there. And then they stole the key from one of us while we were sorting the loot. They waited until we dropped the loot on the ground because we were like, we never thought of like, categorizing the loot or like having a chest or a locked chest, or we just dropped it on the ground, including gold. Um, and they waited until we dropped everything that we made, plus of course whatever else was there. Then they killed us, and we were very surprised. In the small house, we couldn't escape. It was stupid of us to actually get in the house through a moon gate at that point in time. And they killed everyone, and they just walked out. It was amazing. It was amazing. I think that also got changed later, where you couldn't directly teleport to houses or open gates directly into houses. You can correct me on anything that I said that hasn't been the case, but this is roughly how I remember it. Mind you, it's been like ages, okay? So I might be remembering some stuff a little bit altered, but in their vast majority, like 90%, is gonna be accurate for sure. Because yeah, I do remember these guys actually coming in through the gate and then just staying there. And the way that we discovered it, and was because when you would walk over somebody who's sneaking, so invisible completely, you would get a message, you saw something invisible out of the way. Or you didn't have stamina, you couldn't push through, and you would just see your stamina getting reduced, I think, while your character rubber banded on the invisible character in your way. And so I think when one of those thieves actually realized that somebody stepped over him, I think Theo, I think maybe Lawrence or somebody else said like, "Hey, there is someone hidden there." Of course, they knew that they had been stepped on, so they just like fucking jumped us right there and then. It was pretty crazy. Um, but yeah, we also after the thief incident, we also somehow lost the key at one point completely, rendering the house completely unusable. Um, or at least we thought that was the case then, and we didn't like pursue things further, and we just let it fucking crumble to dust because your house would crumble to dust if you left it unattended for too long or something. If you didn't access the door, shit like that. And which in and on itself was a whole culture, by the way, because there were people would figure out because they could check it. They could check your house's door, I think, or the house's signpost to see if it's about to be demolished. And it would say something along the lines of this house is dilapidated and in danger of collapsing. And if you saw that, then you knew that like in the next some amount of hours, like 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't remember, it would actually collapse and all the contents would be on the floor, free for everyone to take. And of course, the plot itself would be free. And so, later on, it became fucking plot wars where people would camp houses and they would wait for them to fall to place their own house or to pick up the stuff. You know, because collapsed houses, of course, would have items in them that were no longer available in the game, like super rare stuff like that. You could make millions out of that shit. So that in and on itself was like a whole like culture, let's say, within the game of like people just observing houses and becoming rich that way. Um, Yeah, Ultima pioneered a lot of things when it comes to MMOs. I think also, and I'm not sure about it, but I think also among them was the mount system where you would get ethereal mounts, which were always in your backpack. You could double click them, and then you would mount them. And I think Ultima Online was the first game that did this. Even though mounts were generally available, there was even a good market if you were a tamer. If you had like animal taming, you could tame rare creatures, some of which could be mounted, like nightmares or some other shit. And some of them could also fight and fight really fucking well. So, for example, having owning a nightmare was prestigious, and you knew, like, if you saw somebody owning a nightmare, like a horse, black horse, a dark horse, like that, you knew that, like, yeah, you probably don't want to fuck with that person because they're just gonna dismount and send the horse against you, and you're also gonna be fighting them, and you're gonna get fucked completely. Um, so yeah, there was a stable system where you could put your non-ethereal mounts and you could stable them, and it cost something, and you also had to like refresh them or some shit. Like it had like some really interesting mechanics as a game, which contributed to some really funny situations sometimes. I think I've told you the story before with Theo and his way of like procuring ingots so that we could raise our blacksmithing levels. Yeah, that was pretty interesting. Um, Lots of social engineering, even though it wasn't known as such, at least not to any of us that I know of. In the form of like, how would you lure somebody into the forest so that we can kill them, or again, like what Theo did with the ingots. That was pretty sick. That was pretty funny. Like a guy came to him. He was practicing. He was like crafting shit to just raise his skill, but he was running out of ingots, and Theo was lazy. He was like, "Nah, I don't want to go and mine my own ingots." Plus, of course, if you went and mined your own ingots, somebody might literally just steal them or kill you and take them, or like wait there and observe you. And when you would create a huge pile which you can't carry in your backpack, therefore you have to actually toss it around by dragging and clicking your mouse, they would just click on it and just like take it and run. And then like they were pros at fucking click and dragging like items off the floor, and they would just fucking completely disappear with your ore, which you had spent like an hour mining or something, like. So he didn't want, the point was, he didn't want that to happen to him because that's something that he did too. So he knew the dangers, right? And of course, player killers camping the spots, like waiting there invisible. But anyway, so that guy comes in and says like, "Is there a blacksmith?" And Theo was like, "Yeah, sure. I'm like, I'm a pro. What do you want?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, well, I want a full plate armor." And then Theo was like, "Well, I'm busy now, but like, if you bring me the ingots, I can craft it for you." And so the guy gave him the ingots, and Theo asked for an absurd amount, and the guy just didn't know how many ingots plate mails, crafting a plate mail would require, apparently, and he just agreed with the amount. And so Theo was like practicing and practicing and practicing, crafting and increasing his skill. And after like an hour or two, the guy showed up again. Theo was like, "Hey, almost done. I need some other ingots, this and that kind, to just like make it better and like give it more stats and like whatever." Some excuses like that. Honestly, he didn't say more stats, but like to make it more resistant to lightning spells and like some made up bullshit, which later on, by the way, wasn't made up because later on materials mattered in terms of resistance to specific damage types. Anyway, uh, so the guy goes and brings him more ingots, and Theo keeps, of course, increasing his blacksmithing. At which point, after another couple of hours, the guy appears again and says, "Hey, where the fuck is my armor, dude?" And Theo says like, "Well, if you give me a bit more ingots, I'm gonna build you a fucking submarine. Forget the forget the armor." And so the guy just gets mad. But the thing is that Theo had like, I remember he had something of importance on him. I think the crafted items he intended to sell actually, like from his practice runs or session. And so he didn't want to risk uh, dying, I think. And so for some reason, Theo starts running. The guy starts running after him, and and the thing is, they I know because I was watching that. Theo was next to me. I was laughing my ass off. And Theo starts running and stumbles across a guy who had just walked through a moon gate that appeared. The guy was a tamer. He had a dragon as well. I'm not even sure what that guy was doing in that fucking place. But okay, what happens is Theo is like, "Oh, here's a portal. I'm gonna step in and lose that guy." And at that point, I think either me or Theo also called the guards on the guy because the guy attacked Theo. I think what happened, thinking about it, I think what happened is that Theo didn't want to call the guards because he was having too much fun. But the guy was persistent. So Theo did call the guards. Guy died. Theo went through the gate. The ghost of the guy followed him because when you die, you will become a ghost that people can see. The gate led to an island, a small. When we're talking small, we're talking like I don't know, like 3 tiles or something, like really really tiny. I don't even know what the guy who originally came from there was doing, for real. We never found out. But the thing is, Theo saw that it's an abandoned island, right? And he knew that the gate is about to close. The ghost of the guy the ghost of the guy that Theo was taking advantage of also walked through. And then Theo walked through again. And then the gate disappeared, so that ghost stayed on the island forever. Because back then there weren't any like, you'd have to directly, talk to a GM and tell them like, "Hey, I am literally stuck on an island. Please help me out of here," which is a hassle. It's a huge hassle. And so, Theo left the guy there, then went to the guy's body, looted the rest of the ingots, and that's how Theo maxed his blacksmithing. And it is shit like that. And believe me, I have like a billion fucking stories from that, like from that game. A billion stories like that, including player-made towns, which we wanted to raid, but like, the folks of the town, the role players, just came up in arms. It was some fucking, I don't know, fucking seven samurai kind of shit, because we were like a band of like killers, and we spotted this, player-made quote unquote role play town. And we were like, "Oh yeah, these guys are role players, and we're gonna do is just kill them, like bully them, take their stuff," which we did. And we did that once, twice. The third time, they were fucking ready. They were ready. I think they had also hired like some guys because we noticed like some people among them were like wearing plate armor. They had like a mage with them, which that shit wasn't there before. And there was a huge fight there, and we were like running around the house. And you know what the best thing about all of that is that like nobody had any hard feelings. Nobody had any hard like you could fuck someone up. Yeah, they'd be pissed, but like at the same time it was funny as fuck. It was ridiculous, it was funny as fuck. I mean, even the shit that happened to us was we laughed about it for hours, like for days. Literally, we would say these stories to the people at the metal cafe that we hung out afterwards, and we would tell them like these stories, and then it was cool. Like for example, when me and Theo were pretending to be NPC, we were pretending to be NPCs. We had memorized the quotes of bandit NPCs. There was like a bandit fort, and what we would do, because that bandit fort was a fucking gold mine, and people would also camp it and farm it because you could kill the bandits. Then you had, first of all, they had some gold, which is not too important, but they did have magic wands, which sold well. Some of them sold well because magic wands were used, especially in PvP, at one point or other. They had weapons you could sell like to an NPC or whatever, but more importantly, they had clothes. And with scissors, you could cut up clothes and turn it into bandages. And bandages was a very important resource because it was the primary way of healing as a non-magic user. I mean, there was even a skill called healing, which used bandages to cure poison, to heal you, and to resurrect people. Yes, you could literally resurrect people with bandages. Imagine that. And so, you'd sell the bandages, for example. You'd dye them the same color because otherwise they wouldn't stack. That was very important. And then you would sell them or keep them, obviously, especially if you're a player killer. So what happened if you were a player killer is that like you turned red eventually, gray at first when you aggro people, but then if you killed enough people, you would turn red. And your karma and fame would also swap around. So instead of being, let's say, a noble lord or lady, you would be a dread lady or dread lord, for example, because you killed so many people. There was also a bounty system, and I think there was also like, if you were like a player killer, you could pledge yourself to basically to chaos, which then also gave you access. It did nothing other than give you access to a shield, which was a cosmetic. That's it. I think it had good stats, but like, and you could get it for free, I think, from a certain place, and it was a good shield, so people wanted to do that. And it also signified that you were, chaos or whatever. And there was also order, and people could be order if they were like noble lords, I think, or illustrious lords. They could sign up with that and be order guys and have like other shields that were cool. And, being order or chaos also meant that you were attackable by your opposite side as well. And that, if they killed you, they rewarded you with some points. There was this like weird chaos versus order system with points, and later on in the future you could do something with that. Like, I don't even know, like get some consumables. I don't fucking remember, honestly. It's 17 years, dude. Give me a fucking break. Um, but anyway, the point was, these brigands were red, and as we were player killers, we were also red. So there you go. Our names were very generic because Theo had a very generic NPC name. I had a very generic NPC name. And we had very generic appearances. And then what we would do is like kill some bandits, take their clothes, wear them so that we look like bandits. There was a neat macro program as well where you could, swap weapons, equip stuff. And so we used like NPC gear, including the weapons. And we had scripted some sentences like, hold there, intruder, or some shit like that the NPCs talked, and we tried to keep our titles concealed. So, for example, because we were dreadlords, let's say, we would die on purpose to lose the lord part, which was the fame part, and we would kill leeches, which was a monster, to gain karma, so that we were no longer dread. So we were basically just completely like NPCs. Like if you double clicked on us and examined, you would see NPCs, literally. And plus, we had learned the walk patterns, we had learned like the behavior. And so anyway, we were incognito, like in the fort, pretending to be bandits. And people would come in unsuspecting. We couldn't really attack outright. We had to actually stage it properly and match the NPC. We were fucking whisperers from Walking Dead. Like literally herding the NPCs. Except instead of herding them, we were like, imitating them. And when the moment was absolutely correct, we would immediately swap weapons to like Grandmaster crafted weapons, and then we would just immediately pummel the guy and just then kill him and take his stuff. And then we would run to our house, which was next door almost, and leave the stuff, but we would wait, of course, to make sure that the guy has left. And we would temporarily store shit in boxes that were like part of the, they were props, basically. Props, so we could just stash things there. And for example, that was very helpful because, for example, it would mean that we don't have to always run back to our house. And that was a new house, by the way, not the one that they described initially. And it also meant that, like, if we got killed, the loot would not be on us, but we would know where the loot is. And that was insane. Because these guys never thought to second the fucking, bandit boxes. Simple as that. But there was also the case that if you left them in there for too long, they would deteriorate because they were not safe containers, obviously. But there was enough time, to do that. And in a pinch, you know, if I was in a pinch, for example, I would go near those boxes, start unloading my shit as I'm dying from the guy. Because don't forget, these guys were surprised. They weren't expecting a fight. So even if they did get the upper hand a couple of times, it was not that bad to the point where we could actually put stuff in there real quick during combat. And then if the guy killed us, we could still recover them, for example. But what happened most of the time is we killed the guys. And that made them so furious. I think we did that like for a week before people smartened up, and on that server at least, which was Chesapeake, because there were no European servers. Later on, there was like Europa and some other one, Drachenfels, I think, and some other shit like that were European, if I remember correctly. But at the beginning, there were only like 3 servers, and all of them like in the US or something. Like we had crazy luck, by the way. We were on a dial-up, so yeah, imagine that on a shared connection in 1997. Okay, so yeah. And that plan backfired because, they got angry. And one of them figured out, probably a thief again, probably figured out, probably a thief figured out where we live, which was down the road, literally, at the crossroads. And so, what happened is, Theo goes, so I have to draw this. Like, you have to understand. I have to draw this. It's gonna escape me. I'm gonna draw this shit. So, what happened was, the house was this, right? Let's say, okay, and this is like the path, and was going like this. We put it on purpose, like near a path like that, and then it went like that down there with like 2 forking roads or whatever. The fort was somewhere, off screen, let's say, but just reference, let's say that it was like here. And so every house had some steps, right? Anyway, Theo was returning from the fort. I was there, just like still, pretending to be an NPC. Theo was returning to the house to drop the loot and everything. So he tries to go through. I will explain to you what these motherfuckers did. Okay, that was ingenious. In my opinion, it was fucking ingenious because there was one person there. All right, one person there, one person there, and probably even more because there were more people. But nobody here. So what happens is once Theo tried to cross here, he gets a message that he solved somebody. So now he can't go anywhere because his stamina has been reduced, which means he can't push through because you needed full stamina. And he was literally just fucking, caged in. And the only way was the house, for which, he had to use the keys. Not only that, but like he did manage to actually fucking unlock the door, but the problem was that like this motherfucker, one of them at least, was closing the door. So, Theo would double click the door, it would open and immediately would shut. Because that guy was like waiting for that and double clicking again. And there were also macros that you could double click the same object, and like, there was lots of macros that were probably legal, but like there was no TOS or anything, it was just everything went, And they fucking boxed him in and killed him right there with the loot and the keys and everything, and they went in, they took everything. Like it was, they got angry. Got angry, okay? And I laughed so much. Like Dale was laughing, I was laughing. It was insane. It was fucking insane. Like I have billions of stories. We will be here until fucking tomorrow if I keep telling you stories from Ultima Online, for real. But we would literally just okay. Last story, which was a fucking excellent story, that one, and short. And then we start and we're gonna, like, if I remember something, I'm gonna tell you. But like, there was this place. I don't remember where it was, and it was part of an expansion. I think the first expansion, which was called the second age or something. And it might be covered in the video, by the way. I think it was called The Second Age, Ultima Online The Second Age. And it was about some wild lands or something. Like, nobody fucking cared because the game had no story per se. It had no quest system. You just logged in and did whatever the fuck you wanted in a completely open world with non-consensual PvP, with thieves running around, accessing your backpack. Your stuff stayed in your corpse if you died. Like, it was, honestly, it was like fucking open session for everything. Griefing, harassment, anything. Except it wasn't toxic. That's the thing. Like, back then when we would say griefing, for example, we meant shit like what I and Theo did. We were like, masquerading as bandits and then player killing other people. That was considered, it was innocent. It was in game. Nobody was toxic to anyone. Sure, there was some trash talk because the server was American, so people had an attitude sometimes, and we kind of like got that attitude. So if we would kill somebody, we would call them like, get wrecked, you fucking noob and shit, and they would be like, oh motherfucker, I'm gonna find you and fuck you up, and then they would find us and they would fuck us. So but nobody was like toxic to each other. So that's what I mean with harassment and all that, and griefing. Not today's sense, and insults were like literally high school level. Oh, you nerd, or you loser, or you fucker, whatever, or you suck at this, or you suck at PvP. That kind of thing. It wasn't ever like toxic. It wasn't ever toxic. It wasn't Call of Duty, which I really liked. That things were kept. I mean, not the verbal exchanges, but like the fact that it was kept in game, if that makes sense. Not in character, not role playing wise, but in game. You didn't trash talk the person. You trash talk their skills. Let's say you called them a noob at the game or whatever. And that was the kind of insults that were going around. It wasn't like today at all. I respected that. I really respected that. And people just, they basically did that themselves. Nobody fucking forced them. They could be worse, but they weren't. Because, respect, which was also a word that you would use a lot in the beginning, especially in PvP. Somebody would kill you, for example, but you fought well. They would type respect, dude, even with a K sometimes, like respect, It was a thing to do if the other guy fought well, you would say like respect. But you could also call them a noob. Just to trash talk. It was awesome. It was awesome as a social experience, and an MMO, it was fucking awesome. But yeah, anyway, the story was, right, Second Age comes out. There is this like new land or something, which again, like nobody fucking cared why it was there at this point. Or what we cared for was the loot and what you can do. And that land kind of prevented, like, I don't seem to remember exactly why, but it was so difficult to get there, and I think enemy density was like also insane, and was full of the most annoying enemies ever, from what I remember. Some giant poisonous snake, some other shit. Like I don't know. It was a shit show. At one point, there was a bird that used the same model as like a normal ass eagle, right? Nothing else, just an eagle. Used the same model, and we did have all names showing and everything. But even though it said, I don't remember what it said, something like a phoenix or something. I don't even remember what it said. Like some kind of bird, though. It might not. It might have been. It might have been another expansion. Even I just remember, as if it was the Second Age. I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The bird was a phoenix, right? And it was in that forest or whatever, some kind of forest area. The bird itself was like in an opening, which was very, like the atmosphere was crazy. So it's an opening and there's a bird there, right? And it's completely inconspicuous. It looks like an eagle and it just says a phoenix, right? That's a phoenix. And like at that point we had looted like gold, we had looted resources, like some leather, some this and that, and we were ready to fuck off to our ship because for some reason we had used the ship to get there. And ships also had storage space, from what I remember. And we would like sometimes just go on a journey and like find islands and just like plunder, just kill stuff and then like bring the stuff back to the boat. Go there, like it was we're having the time of our lives. Okay, we were just on our own adventure, and that's what was amazing about the game. You made your adventure, but like for real, because you had no dailies, you had no weeklies, you had nothing. It was just you and the game. You were making the adventure. There was no storyline. You were just a person, nameless completely. You didn't matter. You were just a person. That's all you were. Literally like the modern survival games, let's say, right? Um, and so we see the thing, and we're like, hey, maybe we should kill that. But then one of us, I think Jim, was like, because Jim was generally the least like he was the most reserved of us, and he said something along the lines of like, look, everything here so far has fucked us, right? To the point where, some of us died as well. So, what if this thing fucking destroys us? And Theo goes like, Theo and myself, we go like, it's just a fucking bird, dude. It's just a phoenix, but like, look at it. It's a fucking bird. It's nothing. It's like an eagle. Let's try it. And if things go bad, we just run. And so, and so we attack the fucking thing. And of course, you're expecting it. It deleted us. And like within milliseconds, like 3 people just completely deleted by that bird. Because it started, like, it was so inconspicuous because it didn't like change the form or anything. It just literally unloaded a fucking hailstorm of spells. And you have no idea that thing fucking barraged us like relentlessly. The last to die was Theo. Uh, he started running because of the dial-up that we had, the fucking shit connection. There were spells and like energy bolts and other shit exploding on him all the way from the clearing with the phoenix to the boat. And so he died like near the boat. And that's it. And then we were like, God fucking damn it. We lost everything, including the boat. Anyway, yeah, no, it's some awesome stories anyway. But yeah, let's make a sound check. 1 second. I'll start here, where I presume that he's gonna be talking.
We have a massive.
All right, so I need to lower it here, and then let me see your
story
volume.
to tell about a massive world that made the word massive a part of all of our lexicon today.
Okay, yeah, I think it's fair enough. And so let's see. I will probably have a lot to say about this video, and that's why I wanted it to be its own fucking, its own stream. So, okay, let's see. Oh, and before, no copyright infringement intended, no this, no that. Like, I'm a fan of Ultima Online. I've been playing this for 17 years, or have played it for 17 years, and I'm just watching a video on it, and I'm gonna comment on it, and like, offer my own like opinions. No malicious intent, blah blah. If this offends, NerdSlayer can let me know, and I can just fucking remove it or whatever. But all I'm doing is like just watching this with you, pausing, and like adding my own content. Let's say that's all, literally.
Ultima Online. To say that this virtual world changed the industry really is an understatement. I mean, it literally created one effectively. It's associated with the term the very industry is.
You'll see a mixture of gameplay from all the new game clients and servers, regardless of the time period. Okay, fair to inform. Yeah, because this is definitely very new. This looks definitely very new. This interface, and I don't think it's because it's the 3D client, which we don't talk about the 3D client. We do not talk about the 3D client. Like, oh my god, what a failure. Anyways,
is now founded largely upon MMORPG. Ultima Online was the first virtual world to
Pandas? Holy shit, I've missed a lot. Pandas?
break MUD's 255
Oh my, oh my god.
player limits, and then some at 2,800 players, and thus achieve massive status. Developed by Origin Systems and published by Electronic, and thus
Wait, let me see that. Exclamation marks over NPCs is something I don't think I've ever seen. This must be new. I recognize that the targeting, like I recognize this circle. I think that was part of the 3D client, but then they moved it also. You could select like what kind of like targeting you wanted, and I think you could actually have it on the 2D client, but like don't quote me on that honestly.
achieve massive status. Developed by Origin Systems and published by Electronic Arts, Ultima Online launched on September 24th of 1997. UO, as it's called for short, would be the first virtual world to eclipse 100k players subscribing and do it in record time, even for a time which was unprecedented. But more than just being the first, and the
I remember this box. I think that's. I think when you bought this box, it also came with like a cloth map and an amulet that was like this shaped. And people here in Greece were losing their shit over that because back then especially, we were very, very fucking religious. Um, we don't talk about Ultima Ascension. Such a weird, such a weird game. But yeah, Ultima Pagan, so Ultima 8 Pagan was perfect. I really loved it. Anyway.
The biggest, Ultima Online utilized a long-standing successful Ultima RPG franchise created and spearheaded by Richard Garriott, and a powerful MUD experienced team and lead developer Ralph Koster, and more. Ultima Online is still alive, and its creators made sure, officially or not, it would remain such by allowing and not discouraging free shops.
Yeah. So these trees signify that this is Feluca, I want to say. At one point, they split the worlds into two. And Feluca was the PvP lands. That was their way of dealing with non-consensual, consensual PvP and stuff, you know? So basically here were the old rules, but in Tramel were the new rules where you couldn't have non-consensual PvP.
Shards, or community shards, aka worlds that are powered by communities, often known as private servers to most other gamers and
This appearance, I'm gonna have to do this. This appearance was originally only for game masters. I am 99.9% sure. Oh, we can't see the skills. That's interesting. I would love to see the skill in case this is like a new, because this looks very new. It looks very new. I don't know why. To what I had seen back then, though.
other communities. However, UO hasn't had its time in the sun for
What is this? What is this pixelated shit? Wait a minute. Is it me? No. Anyway, let's just do this as well.
some time, and has passed from right holder to right holder at this point. And although it has had some new rumblings here and there, like the new legacy,
Oh, wait.
however, UO hasn't had
Fucking Etins.
its time in the sun for some time, and has passed from right holder to right holder at this point. And although
Yeah, this was supposed to be, so to my understanding, these two moons, this used to be something in the game, but I don't remember what. I think back when they split the world into two, for the first time, to address the issue of like non-consensual PvP, they introduced like these two moons, so basically Feluca and Tramel, from what I remember. And I think when like you could see a message, I don't remember how, you could see a message that said something like Feluca is waning and Tramel is taking its place in the sky, or something like, or the opposite, which then meant that you could teleport to Feluca or something. They had made something like that in the beginning. And it's interesting to see, like, that
So it
shit.
has had some
Because the red one is, Feluca, because it signifies, like, red danger, like, that's where PvP happens, and that's where PvP doesn't
new
happen.
rumblings here and there, like the new Legacy server
I have no idea what the legacy thing is.
fitting of its name, a new shard changing the very core of UO with a new realized vision, and well, a never-ending popularity of free shards, but many might not know the full history of UO, how it came to be, and how it actually had two failed sequels that never came to
That is true. They tried to make sequels, but they failed, and I remember this. I remember seeing art and being super excited for this shit. I was so excited. It was weird because this one was cyberpunk plus steampunk. It was so weird. Maybe we will see it. Wait.
fruition, and how EA potentially fumbled one of the greatest MMORPG teams ever. Ultima Online is a pioneer in the virtual world, and is arguably one of the most
Oh, that's so. This is the city of Luna. I want to say this was introduced with the Necromancy and Chivalry expansion, which was basically Necromancer and Paladins. I want to say this is Luna. I want to say this is called Luna.
impactful and influential titles that we have seen
This is what they did later with runes. They introduced rune books so that people couldn't steal your runes, and then you could also insure your items so that it couldn't be stolen. It was pretty weird. Like, it was system upon system upon system trying to fix what was already there, without changing it. They were, that this game had like so many things.
yet. It's an absolute pleasure to
What is this model? I've never seen this model before. What the fuck?
cover this game as someone who discovered it later, yet still managed to fall in love all the same. In the Death of a Game series, we like to take a look at the largest contributing factors for a particular game or company's failure, or death, and document them through the use of a timeline filled with clues so us, the detectives, can solve the case at the end. During
I'm not gonna bother with clues or trying to find or whatever else this kind of like meta game is, but I'm just gonna watch.
the final deduction, every detective's moment of shine. However, the Death of a Game series has never been just about covering failures and massive shutdowns. It's also about covering pieces of virtual world history, lesser known or not. We've showcased this in episodes like PSO, Star Wars Galaxies, and even the Cox episode. City of Heroes, where the videos highlighted some of the beauty and success of the games, and the history of how they got there, less than how they necessarily failed. That being said, every virtual
Oh my god, this main. It isn't. I don't think it had this, but I do think it had like only 2 gems or 3, like login, quit, and something like that.
world can be improved, and many of these stories have such
What are these, bro? Oh, these are the hair options.
interesting happenings that can change the course of the development of the game for the worse. Ultima Online is no different. A
I'm not surprised that a lot of the footage here is so old that it's like pixelated as fuck.
game mirrored in controversy since the beginning. A game that the company funding it didn't really even believe in, and a game that led to the creation of an entire extra genre and influenced its own so heavily that you can't blink in a virtual world without seeing or hearing some influence from UO. This is Yoshi
That is true.
P's favorite game after all, and many more
What?
influence from UO. This is Yoshi P's favorite game.
Dude, how can Yoshi P? Are we talking about like the creator of Final Fantasy? Not the creator, but like the Honcho of Final Fantasy 14. His favorite game was this, and he came up with Final Fantasy. No. What? No. Okay. To be fair, it being his favorite game doesn't mean that he was influenced a lot by it. So there is that.
After all, and many more developers and players. This episode is special, not just because we want to document this great world-changing virtual world, but because we even got an exclusive interview with the lead designer himself, Raf Koster, concerning the game.
Hi, I'm Raf Koster, and I was the original lead designer for Ultima Online.
So without further ado, detectives, we have a massive story to tell about a massive world that made the word massive a part of all of our lexicon today.
Yeah, that is true. Make no fucking mistake. you have MMOs today because of this game. Yes, there was like a couple of other games before it, but this scale and this kind of systems and everything, no, everything you have today, if you have a favorite MMO today, even Final Fantasy, you owe it to this and nothing else.
Let's talk about Ultima Online, the whole story.
Damn, I'm ready for this shit.
The story begins with a single-player game. Hey, that sounds familiar. Ultima is actually an ancient single-player RPG series
Yes, that's true. I mean, as I told you, Alex was crazy about Ultima in general.
from 1981, created by a Texas-based UK dual citizenship holder, Richard Garriott. Richard was none other than the son of Owen Garriott, one of the first NASA scientist astronauts. Richard was a major fan of Lord of the Rings and Dungeons & Dragons, and began writing computer games in his spare time in high school. Richard would actually go to the same college as me, University of Texas,
Really? All this is so interesting.
and then began programming the first Ultima for the Apple II. Published by Sierra Online, Ultima 1 and the 2 subsequent Ultimas would reach success for the time, and lead to Richard and his brother, and their father, to establish their own company, Origin Systems. By 1985, with the launch of Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar, Richard would have gained notoriety, not notoriety, even greater, and success with his RPG series even further, even coining the term Avatar based on Hindu concepts of deities. Origin Systems would create a number of more Ultima games, ultimately up to 8 of them later on, before they would stumble into
This must be 7, if I'm not mistaken. This must be 7.
creating an online version. This is significant because it would mean that Ultima Online later on would have an already built and expanded world, and one that players were already familiar with, just like Phantasy Star Online had that with Phantasy Star in Japan. Electronic Arts, who was founded 10 years before by former Apple employee Trip Hawkins, who helped introduce much of the big business that we know today into the video game industry, had grown to become a successful developer and publisher. It was Trip who pushed EA into sports, franchise by year sequels, and much more. Anyway, let's talk about the evil NDA some other time. The reason we're talking about them in this notoriety, even greater, and
Why
success
are
with
we
this
rewatching
significant because Trip Hawkins a year time. The reason we're talking about them in this case is that they were growing to the giant monster that we know them as today at this time. And at the time, they were acquiring tons of video game companies along.
Arabrai was a city that you could visit in Ultima Online. Sorry, listen, I am gonna nerd out on this shit. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm gonna be nerding out. Because, yeah, I mean, again, 70 years of my life.
Along the way, and leaving a wake of destruction as well. EA would acquire Origin Systems in September of 1992. I spoke to Richard Garriott a number of years ago, and Richard actually spoke to this acquisition and how fast things changed for him and his team at Origin. Richard would tell me something to the effect of, and how.
So what he has right here, this thing, is the symbol of the order thingy that I mentioned. They had a snake. The Chaos guys, they had a shield with a Chaos symbol. But this snake would be, which is a silver serpent, which was an in-game creature as well, was on the shield of the guys who, pledged to order anyway.
How fast things changed for him and his team at Origin. Richard would tell me something to the effect of that EA immediately made it be known that they were not a normal company, and the way that they were doing business might have been normal for the corporate world, but it wasn't for the budding video game industry. I've been told stories of Trip Hawkins himself, meeting with Richard, and the meeting going something along the lines of, well, that's not how things are done here, buddy boy, with Trip telling Richard that he wouldn't be able to delay his project from launch, which would actually be concerning Ultima Online, which we will now begin to talk about in detail. After the success of Morpgs and Muds of the mid and late 80s, Richard Garriott had the desire to build Ultima, his single-player RPG, into a world that would allow many players to share, even more players than any game ever before.
When we started working on Ultima Online, it was a big budget attempt to make that experience graphical. The folks at Origin had been talking about making an online game, Ultima, for quite some time. They talked about it with Sierra and other possible partners, and so on. But it wasn't until really the internet came along and went graphical post the Mosaic browser that there was an explosion of interest in the industry for doing it.
Due to the architecture of Linux, which was used to power the early online MUDs, there was a file descriptor limit of 255. Because of this was a limit to the amount of players at the time. UO, on the other hand, was something revolutionary.
And I think it's important to set the context there. When we started out, MUDs in general capped at 250 concurrent. Meridian 59 capped at 250
Meridian 59, holy shit.
concurrent. That was just basically a limitation of the day. Today, when we look at games that support more, it's often called server meshing. That's what Star Citizen's calling it now, but other people have other names for it. Ultima Online invented that technology.
There you go. That's a shield, for example, that I'm talking about. And you can see the silver serpent. And here you can see this house is slightly worn. So this house is being kept fresh. It's not in danger of collapsing, for example. Lords of Death order. Wow, Lords of Death. I'm telling you, it was like, it was, oh my god. You know what? No, let's just watch.
In order to push up the capacity of a single server to about 2,800.
The UO team, which consisted of Richard Garriott and much of his Ultima series team, and only around 10 core UO developers, all of which had major MUD experience. Yep, nerds are to blame for the virtual world industry, and especially MMORPGs. Who would have thought it? Ralph Koster and his wife, Kristen Koster, would also be featured on this team, and although accredited for joining the team later on, would form much of the design background and foundation of the game. Rich Vogel would join the squad later on, as well as others such as Starlong, Scott
Starlong, yeah, I do remember that.
Phillips, Rick Delaschmidt, and a ton of other developers who went on to form development teams for pretty successful games and even games like World of Warcraft. The UO team would take many popular MUD systems and ideas and both simplify and combine them in some ways to put them together for their own game. The team would first prototype UO using an Ultima 6 engine, while the team would essentially pioneer the game the rest of the way in the process. The UO team had a budget of around 2.5.
This must be a very early screenshot. This must be a very, very early screenshot. This was your toggle for war mode, which means that you can attack by double-clicking. I think the back scroll, was something like turned into something called the profile after a while, because you could write in your profile some shit.
5 million, which was considered actually quite big for the time and the biggest budget of the time. And really the first big budget approach in a virtual world, I guess, if you just don't consider Lucasfilm Games' Habitat, which was actually the first commercial virtual world. While they had an impressive budget and a talented nerd-hardened team, UO's development was anything but sunshine and roses in this success story you might have assumed. In fact, both UO and its first expansion were produced in intense crunch, as Ralph Koster would state in my interview with him concerning UO.
We built UO in about 2 years and a quarter. It was extreme crunch. There were issues with burnout, depression, drug addiction, you name it.
Holy shit.
People were just destroyed.
I've even heard words to describe this work environment such as unsafe, a sweatshop, and extremely stressful. Throughout these crazy work conditions, that would eventually lead to the departing of all of the original team members, and UO was developed in record time, reportedly only taking around 2 years or less to develop. While EA had faith in Origin systems, there wasn't actually much faith in UO. Richard Garriott actually had to do a lot of convincing to even get them to greenlight the project in the first place. And according to Ralph Koster, EA didn't even expect the game to sell over a few dozen thousand copies. Meanwhile, leading into the game's beta, they would request $5 from players for potential beta testers to cover the shipping costs and cover the cost of an actual game disc, because that's how you had to do things back then, to actually beta test something. But it turns out that Ralph reported that 50,000 users were willing to do this, which would shatter EA's expectations and, well, just about everyone else's. Part of EA's handling of UO and their expectations of such, as Ralph would admit to me, came from a massive lack of inexperience and knowledge.
Jesus.
This would prove to be true for many more powerful publishers, including EA multiple more times, something that would arguably take them decades.
Brewmeister. Okay. Yeah, these were later changed to, I think, health and then mana and stamina.
Decades to learn. This is important to state because with UO and its success, goalposts were being shifted, erected, and moved all the time. It really was unprecedented at the time to see an online game of the scale that was soon to be unleashed upon the world in more ways than one. Though it should be added that some of the most complex systems, such as the ecology system, never actually made it to the launch. The UO team was in such a crunch that they had to cut out a lot of the content before launch, such as 2 entire playable continents,
What?
and more. So even though UO would make a crazy impact, even Raph admitted to me that the team behind the game didn't really have an idea of that. Or better yet, their belief had been sort of burned out of them over time. That's what makes their success all the more impressive. The beta test for UO would take place September in 1997, just before the launch of the game, and would feature multiple tens of thousands of players over the course of the days that it was up. UO didn't have the luxury
There you
of going
go.
with
This is the message.
thousands of players over the course of the
Being perfectly rested, you shove them out of the way. So even if there was something invisible, you would see that. You shove something invisible out of the way. Oh, God.
days that it was up. UO didn't have the luxury of going to trade shows, well, besides E3, which was a fledgling, mostly commercial-focused convention, RIP E3, so they had to do their marketing through the use of their existing IP, Ultima, and, well, word of mouth. And while this is more difficult, it creates actually a more cemented community and a support system surrounding the game. Word of mouth is the most effective marketing in virtual world history, because it's how humans can relate these experiences to other humans in a way that makes us want to join in on the world, in a way where they don't have a financial gain from it either like a developer would.
Ultima Online, from the very beginning, was meant to be something that drew lessons from all of them at once.
He's headed towards the bank, from what I see. But this is changed from what I remember.
And our core philosophy was to simulate.
Yeah, that's the bank. So this is interesting because the concept of the bank. So this is where you would access your shit, right? Just as you see in modern MMOs, obviously. But for Ultima Online, it was a social place. It was also where people would gather to socialize, essentially, in game. Or roleplay or whatever. Thieves would be around. They would try to be stealing stuff, and yeah, it was like standing at the bank and like just talking or shit talking or stuff like that was like it was the healthy equivalent of what you see in games such as Final Fantasy with people congregating in Limsa Lominsa, for example. That went wrong. This went right. Like this was done proper. Like this was healthy. And yeah, even including that the possibility of losing your stuff, for example, to a thief because you just weren't paying attention. Somebody like, you didn't read something here. We tell you notice somebody trying to sneak through your belongings or some shit like that, which means that there's somebody invisible there trying to peek into your inventory to steal something. Even with that, it was very healthy. The people you see up here, well, not these specific people, but like, people you would see up here were considered elite, from, elite being elite speak for elite, obviously, written with the L33T, so elite. In case you don't know that fucking nerdy shit. Yeah, people who would come here, they were considered elite, they were showing off, they were popping.
Build and simulate an alternate reality that players could kind of live in.
Ultima Online launched on PC September 24th, 1997, and, well,
that's when I started playing.
rest was really history, literally. Not only was UO one of the first major virtual worlds to launch in the 90s, it was by far the largest in scale, player size, and popularity. For many MUD players, UO was an instant hit, because it was an expansion on many of the things that they already enjoyed and featured in their own games. And for RPG players yet to venture online, now they had 2D graphics to help them see things and a world of possibilities and roleplay opportunities ahead of them. UO, at the core, had a simple gameplay loop. You accrue wealth, power, in the form of a variety of skills, and you form relationships with other players, whether in the form of groups, friendships, or guilds. What you do now with that wealth or newfound power is really up to you, and thus that was where the complexity lied. If you want to be a tamer who would sell exotic animals without ever lifting a sword, you could. Or a real estate broker, or perhaps a thief who would steal from players and monsters. What if you wanted to become a legendary beggar? All of that was possible in UO. How you achieve that wealth, that you then use to enrich your character, and in the world that you inhabit, such as things like player housing, is really up to you. And that's the beauty of UO. The thing people hate these days, that classic, you can do anything statement, which really kind of translates to just, you can't do much of anything, was actually true in Ultima Online.
It was actually true. To the extent that the game can do it, then yeah, you can do it. It was okay. So I'm gonna say this, which is it's gonna be a bit controversial, but you have to understand the context under which I'm saying it. It was akin to VR chat. Like you can just do anything in there. You were just yourself, represented by an avatar. You could do anything you want. You want to beg? There was a skill called begging. Like you want to do blacksmith? Cool. You could sell armor, become rich. Like you could do shit. Anything you wanted. And there was no overarching plot. There was nothing. It was just you and the world and other people, and that's it.
Online. And true in the late 90s. Now think about that for a second. The reason that this is also a bit of a sad thing to say out loud is because it's not really the case in the current virtual world history today. Many of the virtual worlds, largely not the massive variant, don't really offer anything besides fighting and increasing your power level. This actually comes more so from Deku Mud and MUDs like that, which were only a particular slice of MUDs and were only focused on vertical power progression. This game formula would become so popular it would lead to the creation of EverQuest, WoW, and even RuneScape. Now, there's nothing wrong with a bit of variety, but after Deku Mud,
this mount is called an Ostard. Anyway.
Its formula was so popular, it's almost like players in the industry forgot about UO's approach and other MUD styles.
This is something that I have never seen.
An approach that was supposed to be for all kinds of players, from all walks of life. Even things like VR chat would have had a place amongst MUDs. Virtual worlds weren't just for those who wanted to compete for levels, whether in PvP or with PvE raids, very common in this type of game. This would actually be proven when data would come out concerning UO's player base, which even in the late 90s and early 2000 had a record-breaking impressive 20 to 30% female player base. And an approach that was not only successful, it was revolutionary.
It did have quite a few, which for the time was unheard of. Okay, for the time it was unheard of. It had quite a few, female players as well, and I do have some interesting like dating stories, I would guess, which was far more innocent than what you're thinking now. I'm pretty sure. Far more innocent. And one of them was pretty sad as well. But yeah, I'll get to that eventually.
And still a torchbearer today, with very few games being able to eclipse it in terms of sheer options and ingenuity.
What UO represented was kind of the dream of a more all-encompassing online game. And we see that influence later in things like Sword Art Online, Ready Player One, pretty much every depiction of immersive alternate worlds in media.
Raph spoke to this with the success of the survival genre, which took UO's most common gameplay features and aspects, unrestricted largely, PvP with full loot, territory control and player housing, and a focus on player progression and leveling. Something that you can even see in the forefathers of the survival genre, like Minecraft, created by Marcus Notch Persson, who's actually a former virtual world developer and lover, being behind Worm Online. Ironically, Minecraft is a game focused on proc-gen world building and PvE largely, and yet has the most popular PvP servers, and the PvP servers are the most popular for Minecraft. Speaking of PvP, that's something that we're gonna have to talk about a little bit later. Within a few months, UO would eclipse 100k paying users, becoming one of the most commercially successful games ever.
Originally, when we started out, we did not have any idea that UO could potentially become as big as it did.
The game cost $65 and was costing around $10 for a monthly subscription fee. And this was during a time where barely anybody had computers, where now UO would become a reason that you would actually get a computer. UO, besides being a good game, was creating stories that were
Oh god.
memorable and would be remembered and documented for many years to come. That's where the magic of virtual worlds lied, in identity expression, socialization, and emergent gameplay, or experiences. That's because science says that experiences are more memorable than purchased goods, which means that theoretically, virtual worlds like UO were a never-ending supply of novel and emergent experiences, unlike anything of the time. This was an addiction for both players like me and the business heads behind it all, in this case, EA, which would explain why they would continue to pour upwards of like $1 billion into the industry after that in the next 15 years. EA had a knack for being early with things, and with UO and virtual worlds, that was no different. But EA being early isn't necessarily a good thing. UO would truck on with no stop.
Second Age, there we go.
Straight into their next expansions, still helmed by Raph Koster.
We started Second Age basically January of 98. And I was literally the only original UO team member left on the team. Everyone else either moved over to UO2, went back to U9, or quit the company.
Yeah, UO2 was such a bad move. Ascension, which was Ultima 9, which he mentioned. God, such... Ascension was like watching somebody trying to... I don't know how to say it. It tried to do things that games today are doing, and of course, it just didn't have the horsepower for it. You know, it didn't have the engine for it. It was weird. It was such a weird thing.
That was the degree of burnout, right? Like, we had programmers who were so angry about being on call with pagers.
The Second Age, also dubbed T2A, would launch October 29th, 1998. And this is the most positively received expansion in the game's history. This can be seen both in how many free shards utilized this patch date and the reception of the time. The expansion would also only cost $7 and add the Lost Lands continent to the game, as well as a big window mode.
So the guy with the orange name, I think that's an enemy guild, because I think you could declare war from a point on. Red name, that was a player killer.
Expanded chat features and a tutorial.
Green name was an ally, I think in your party, perhaps. No, I think that this means that they're in a party or that they're in the same guild. I don't remember.
The new update also featured a cis-trans system, which basically allowed people from different cultures and different languages to speak to each other with a rudimentary system, something that PSO would actually use to great success later on. Delucia and Papua would make their appearances as major towns. While the reception was positive, especially from the player base, the critics were right to point out that perhaps it wouldn't be expansive enough to stop the upcoming 3D virtual worlds that were yet to launch. You have to think, UO came from the 90s and 2000s. During this time, we see the most technological shifts and advancement in gaming history, which were going to hurt UO in the sense that they were going to look very dated, pretty much within just a few years. I mean, the PlayStation came out in 2000. UO would continue to shatter the ceiling though, now with the ability to spread to Asia and even Europe. And although this might not really seem significant to mention, the reason that new markets were so important for UO being exposed to is that now
I think that's the 3D client. It was really... it was such a huge mistake.
Now these markets were experiencing virtual worlds for the first time, especially the Western kind, because Korea was also very early to the fray. Second, it would actually turn UO into one of the first actual global virtual worlds. And finally, it would plant the seeds that would lead to what would come later in the Japanese and
yes, it was called Luna, right. And Umbra was the necromancer town, yeah. The expansion was the Age of Shadows, or AOS as they call it. It was a weird thing, like nobody cared about the lands, there was nothing interesting in it. You would only buy this just to have access to necromancy and chivalry, basically. Nobody cared about the lore, about this, about nothing. The main towns were shit, were way too small. I don't know, it was just weird. It was a weird expansion.
Korean markets. For example, around this time, you have a young Yoshi P playing UO,
Damn.
dubbed one of his top 2 favorite virtual worlds. A very crucial event would happen around the same time. While Origin Systems reportedly had over around 200 developers in total, the majority of them were focused on Ultima as a franchise, meaning Ultima 9. However, Ultima 9 would fail to meet the hefty expectations that were placed on it after it launched, and due to such, EA would actually shift Origin Systems to a multiplayer online studio only. While this might sound like a logical conclusion, and fair play, it was actually EA's handling of Ultima 9 that was the large reason it failed. For example, they had their team split and focused largely.
Yeah, Ultima 9 was rust. It was a disaster in every way. Ultima 9 was a disaster in every way, and it did try to do. You could see that they were trying to do things that probably would have worked if they had more time, maybe more money, maybe if it was tried today, perhaps. I don't fucking know.
Largely on UO, a team that didn't even want to work on the game, by the way, and they had to change the engine a few times while trying to transition to open world 3D, and they had to rewrite the story a few times. I mean, Richard Garriott literally showed up at the last second and kind of like saved the day with Ultima 9. Needless to say, EA had little idea, especially for the time, for some reason, that giving your video game developers little time or tools leads to bad outcomes. They literally took the majority of the Ultima 9 team off the game, moved them to another game, then Ultima Online's sequel in the background, which was another game that they didn't want to work on, and it wasn't wanted by the UO core team, who just wanted to keep expanding the original game.
The core original team, which was those mud folks and a few others, was relatively small, right? We're talking under 10 people were really what you'd call the core UO team. And then an army of people was brought over from Ultima 9. And many of them didn't want to be there. The combination of that was a lot of burnout. We built UO in about 2 years and a quarter.
I mean, the history of Ultima 9 has its own page dedicated to it. That should tell you something. EA forced Ultima 9 despite losing much of its original leadership and team having to be redone essentially by Richard Garriott himself at the last second to launch by the end of 1999. So it wasn't a surprise Ultima 9 was a failure, and EA's handling of it and everything surrounding it, especially Ultima Online, would lead to so much souring amongst the developers of the franchise and IP that nearly all of the original developers would start departing after this. Before the team would fully fracture, would come the news that EA was indeed working on a sequel for UO.
Yeah. So, without seeing what the guy says, I'm just gonna tell you what I remember from this. I remember there were different races. This was a robot race. Don't remember these guys. And humans. And I think you could select from them. Races in UO came much later. I think even later than... So, which expansion was it? The one after the Asian-inspired expansion was the one where you could be, I think, an elf or a gargoyle. You could actually just change into those races, which was awkward. Through a quest, you could be turned into an elf or like a gargoyle later, or back to human if you wanted. Or you could create an elf or a gargoyle or a human. This is from Ultima 2, I'm pretty sure. Because I do remember like my god, this game was gonna be so weird if they released it. But yeah, I think I still remember a robotic race. I seem to remember these guys and humans.
Dubbed UO2. Ultima Online 2 is being billed as a second generation.
It was literally, if you could see the concept art for various monsters, that they were weirdly like cybernetic for some reason.
MMORPG meant to improve upon the first game and push the genre even more forward. Most importantly, it would feature a 3D engine allowing it to compete with the 3D monsters to come.
Or that's what I remember anyway.
The design would also disable things like PvP except in special areas, emphasize more grouping, as large as even 20 to 30 player groups, and they would limit the ability.
Or maybe it looked cyberish to me, like to my younger self back then, before I even had like much of
for
a
players
concept.
to become all-around GMs. That's because in Ultima 1, there was already a skill
No, that's a gargoyle player, for example.
cap of around 700 skills. But that was still enough to create some super powerful murdering nerds. But you can actually watch the trailer and pitch video for Ultima Online 2 on screen now, and throughout this segment.
But yes, you can see that it's like technologically
For
advanced
starters,
and all
the
that
animations are actually really good for the time. And there was something certainly UO about it, but it also kind of looked a little bit more generic, which is actually a very common problem that 2D games would have whenever they would try to shift to 3D. Best examples of this being Dark Eden, another one of my favorite virtual worlds. But perhaps with UO2, with these ideas, could have been something great. Because the T was, according to Raph Koster and more, the majority of the OG UO devs didn't even want a sequel. realizing that it would split their ability to create more art and potentially kill a budding virtual world before it ever really started. But EA, regardless, would start developing throughout the next couple of years. This would mean none of the leaders like Richard Garriott and Raph Koster would be featured on the project, UO2. This would also mean that Richard Garriott and Raph
It's
Koster,
interesting to me that. Wait a minute.
the OG UO devs, didn't even want a sequel, realizing that it would split their ability to create more art and
So it's interesting to me to see that they were planning for kill effects. So this guy catches fire or energy fire, whatever you want to call
potentially
this,
kill a
as he
budding
dies,
virtual
based on the spell that hit him.
world before it ever really started.
And then you can see players that are, characters or enemies, I don't know, that are ragdolled.
EA,
Here, for example,
regardless,
this guy was taken down, as you can see very clearly.
would start developing throughout the
And
next
it's
couple of
here that guy gets launched. So this is very interesting to me because, for example, this behaves a little bit like Guild Wars, right? But this is like,
years. This would mean none of the leaders like
that is so interesting. So they were planning to do that. Okay.
Richard Garriott and Raph Koster would be featured on the project, UO2. This would also mean that Richard Garriott and Raph Koster themselves and the remaining UO core team would start departing. Raph and Richard would take two different immediate paths. Richard would actually take the majority of the Ultima team to found Destination Games a bit later on, where he would develop and launch Tabula Rasa, before becoming the head of NCSoft's Western Division. Raph instead would immediately join Varan Interactive, pre-Sony or SOE, and would develop Star Wars Galaxies, another world-defining virtual world that still sees a lot of play on private servers today. During this time, UO would see a whopping 150
So what they're trying to do here,
on private servers today. During
if I remember how this works, this is how you summon, were they called a champion or something? But anyway, you killed stuff and you filled the candles on the altar by killing. And then you could activate it and summon like a boss thing. And then that boss thing could drop some very, very, very expensive items. Like, for example, a 120 scroll, which, as the name implies, it's basically allowed you to go over the cap of a skill. A cap of a skill was 100, but with these scrolls, you could reach like 120, for example. There were 105, 110, 15, and then finally 20 scrolls. They were, depending on the skill that they were meant to uncap, basically, they were extremely expensive. And as you can imagine, these scrolls and champions, whatever, being on Feluca, which was like a PvP world, right? As I said, was the PvP version of the world when they split. Well, first it gave a lot of incentive for PvE players to be there, which also frustrated. I mean, I'm pretty sure the developers saw it as incentive, but it was forcing them to be in an environment where they didn't want to be in, which caused like a lot of problems. And of course, they would be targeted by player killers who would wait for them to kill the champion or whatever it was called, and then they would kill them and take scrolls, for example. For which reason, PvEers would hire PvPers, give them half the loot or something to protect them, and there would be drama in the sense of like, but not drama, in the toxic sense, but in the sense of like, these guys might betray them to a raiding group that would then raid them, and it created this whole thing. And then of course PvE crowds were just not having that shit. They were so fucking mad about it. I understand it.
during this time, UO would see a whopping 100.
I myself raided some attempts at champions with the guys. We did try that. Eventually what happened is, when I got in PvP for good, like actually, learning the game, actually caring for stats, actually, all that stuff, once I started down that road, I was noticed because I was like very successful as a solo, like, player killer, let's say, because the guys were mostly gone at that point. That I was noticed by a very large guild, and they were organizing this kind of thing, and so I would take part in it. I was also kind of sought after because I was playing something that nobody else wanted to play, and those who did play didn't play it well enough, which was basically ninja, right? So stealth player killer, essentially, with poisoning and other stuff like that nobody wanted to do, but you always wanted a person like that in your team who can stealth, who can like, poison people all the time. Like I was basically just harassing people at that point. But again, not in the sense of like toxic harassment, but in the sense of like, tactically harassing them, I was really good at my fucking thing. I was really fucking good at it.
50,000
Like if you're coming from Guild Wars 2 and you think thieves, due to their stealth and all that, are annoying to deal with, I would be your worst fucking nightmare. I would be your worst nightmare. A real fucking revenant. I would haunt you. I would kill you when you don't expect it. There's no chance you would get me. There was no fucking chance. I was unkillable completely. It was it was insane.
subscribers. EA was raking in the dough, even though the creators had moved on. Sadly, I don't really think that the UO team ever really got the recognition that they deserved for creating such a success.
This is from such a situation right here. And I remember the dungeon. I don't remember what it's called, but I do remember the dungeon. The champion would spawn here. They would kill it. And, that's when, like, radiators would appear. And they would block this with, like, these walls or, paralyzation fields and such shit. And then it would be a matter of, like, who can bring more reinforcements, who's more ready, how fast we're gonna kill. Like, it was a whole fucking, balance, let's say.
Successful work of art. UO wasn't without faults though. And no, not just the aging graphics and engine either, or the fact that the game was incredibly complex and difficult to pick up as a new gamer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you try to pick this up now, it would, like, judging from how people react to, for example, starting a new MMO right now, if this is still ongoing and you try to pick it up, like the official, right, with all the systems and all the things and everything, because I don't know how it is on a private server, but if you try to pick that up, you would be immediately overwhelmed. Immediately overwhelmed, knowing people today.
No, a large issue
You would probably quit it like day one.
breeding since the beginning of the history of Ultima Online was the PvP, more specifically, the lawless PvP that was taking place in the majority of the game.
I remember this place. We use this place. I don't remember where it is, but people use this place for friendly duels or to have duels to sort out differences. I'm not even joking. Like that's where you'd go to have a more structured PvP or a duel. Because dueling was different from player killing. You would have different skills because it's a one-on-one, right? It was different skills, different items you would use. So often enough, for example, it happened to me too. I would kill somebody, like really fucking destroy them, and then it would be like, duel me, you noob, one-on-one. And I would accept, for example, which means that I was not allowed to stealth. I wasn't allowed to use like potions, for example. There were some rules for dueling that people were accepting, which of course later on was just like disregarded anyway because it was just an antiquated, like, get back kind of system that people invented just to feel like, just to feel better for losing to you essentially in open PvP. But yeah, I mean, for a while it was popular, and you'd have people who were, for example, perfect at duels, but they couldn't hold their own in actual, lawless, as the guy says, PvP, where you can use everything. You can dismount people from stealth using bolas and then jump them or shit like that, But dueling, this is where it happened usually, at least on the server I was playing on.
The reason this was such an issue was that because not all players were focused on combat, especially in Ultima Online, which allowed for that, or even just PvP focused, they would encounter other players who were, players like me, who specialized in fighting solo and trying to steal as much loot as possible, aka player killing. Now, player killing originally was supposed to be used by nerds like me as more of a badge of honor to describe the players killing other players against the odds and then taking their loot. But instead, player killing became a way to describe all forms of PvP, including griefing and ganking that was taking place rampantly in UO.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There was no moderation of any kind. Everything went. As I said, everything fucking went.
Now, ganking is not against the rules, it's just killing somebody whenever they're not aware, but griefing, in many cases, is.
Griefing, I wouldn't say encountered. I mean, it depends on what he describes it as, let's say.
Well, if there are rules. That's where things started to kind of blur lines and made UO for a lot of players just not really fun and impossible.
Yeah, this, for example, this would be griefing. For example, like trapping somebody, that was very common. To counter this, you would want to actually have a teleport scroll on you, like literally just a blink teleport, to counter this, and to counter being trapped in paralyzation fields. Because I think this is an energy field. Yes, it is. Instant grab energy field. There you go. This would be coupled with paralyzation fields usually. And that's because they wouldn't want you to cast or blink in any way, so they would also try to paralyze you. For which reason you would also have a trapped box or many trapped boxes, and you would use like a macro program to put it on a hotkey. Because paralyzation, the way it works was like until you take damage, you're paralyzed for as long as the duration of the spell anyway. But if you take damage, you're free. So you would essentially use the trapped box to cause minor damage to yourself, so that you can escape. And and that's why people sometimes, for example, kept an alt or something with very low skill in magic, I think, or something else, and they would trap small boxes with very low skill, which means that they did very low damage for the purpose of breaking paralyze.
Possible to even imagine it being fun, because they thought now I can die, lose my things without much recourse. To make matters worse, as Raph Koster admitted to me in our interview, Raph wanted a hands-off approach, and wanted the community to solve the problems more so. Issue being that the players didn't have enough tools to stop the griefers. Sure, things like guards came later and even anti-PK guilds could stop them, but these were pretty limited. Bounty systems didn't exist, alignment systems were barely there, and the criminal system was very easy to take advantage of. There were also very few ways for non-PvPers to
Yeah, the flagging system was extremely weird. For instance, somebody could turn themselves gray, which means that they performed something that was illegal, but not necessarily as much as to flag them completely open. So they weren't going red, for example, they would only go gray, as opposed to being blue, which is the default state. And what gray does is basically after a while you become blue again, as long as you don't continue with your like quote unquote illegal activities, right? Hey, Neris. And what they would do is they would time it, because it was easy to time, obviously. And they would appear, for example, in town, right? They would appear in town, and they would be gray, which means that everyone can attack them. So people would assume, for example, that these people just stole something right at the moment, and they would attack them. So the guy who is gray, all he has to do is not touch the attacker until they turn back blue. At which point they would rush the attacker and touch them, which triggered auto attacks, of course, which now means the other guy is attacking a blue guy, essentially. Which means now they're attackable. And even worse, they could call the guards on them because they attacked them. That's it, in town. And so then the griefer would just call the guards and they would kill the other guy, and then he would just loot their stuff. I mean, that kind of thing was, yeah. You just had to have street smarts to not get caught in that shit, you know? You just had to have street smarts for that. There was no, as NerdSlayer says, there was no, like, safety system for that shit.
deal with these players, which is more so the issue, not the fact that the PvP even existed. That's exactly what the infamous/famous expansion UO Renaissance set out to do. Initially bragging that they were going to double the world size, UO's team would actually just clone the previous world.
Yeah, I remember that. I didn't remember this was an expansion, but I did remember that they had said, oh, we're doubling the world size. But what they did was they split it into Feluca and Tramel, essentially.
And allow for PvP in only one of those maps, and the other map you actually had to flag for it. One world dubbed Felucia, the other world dubbed Trammel. The problem was that one of these worlds effectively allowed players to remove all risk, which meant that they could increase their power levels in banks without really anything stopping them. And this is a problem for two reasons. One, they can effectively beat the game this way because hoarding is always effective in virtual worlds. Second, the game wasn't intended to be this way. So now players could get even more powerful and grind very easily in a way that necessarily wasn't supposed to be there previously. Now, logically, why would players not want to accept this deal? It's a pretty good deal. You can go to one zone and just PvE without ever having to worry about being PK'd. But here's the thing, opinion aside, the data actually proves that it was successful. According to Gordon Walton and Raf Koster, Trammell brought back tons of players in the dozens of thousands even. So it was a success, right? Case closed. Well, sort of. While it might have brought back...
Yeah, that was your skill list. This game didn't have classes. You basically chose some skills. You had a cap of certain skill points, I think 720. Not accounting for the 120 scrolls that I mentioned. You just had, I think even it didn't increase your skill points. It just increased the cap at which you can have a skill. So yeah, basically you had the 720 points, and that means you could have any combination of things, like maybe a skill at 120 and then something else at 75, and then and you made decisions like that, but there was no restriction. You could have, for example, all of these skills that you see here. There was no class. Nothing was stopping you from just having the most useless build ever, for example. Um, and back then also, before they introduced like the locking of skills and even the lowering of skills to increase other skills, it was a mess, because you would accidentally increase skills and then you had to actually wait for them to decay, which was also a problem in and of itself. The fact that the skills actually decayed was like so annoying. Anyway, they fixed all that with a system of like locking them, which means they don't decay, and then lowering them, which means that the skill that is increasing at the moment is going to be absorbing points from the skill that is being lowered. Like it was nice, but like too much.
Initial players, there's no guarantee that those players wouldn't have quit for another hardcore reason, especially with the more casual MMORPGs on the horizon. Worse, the most memorable aspects of UO, included in the reviews concerning the game, reflections, recollections, postmortems, and more, was about the PvP. Whether it was being ganked, griefed, ganking somebody, being a PK, or even like an anti-PKer. This means that, in my opinion, as even Raf admits, the better approach, which Raf even now seems to be more inclined to agree with too, in a modern context, would have been to properly fix the systems instead of just removing them outright. But this requires you to, as Raf
Squeal, dog squeal. Typical fucking trash talk.
postulates,
This guy is advertising something for sale 1K. When I came home last night, okay, there was a man in my house. He had a mechanical arm. What?
to essentially become a governor/government, to make sure that you can rule the community properly, which is not laissez-faire. But Raf told me that he doesn't really see a way that the laissez approach really works anymore, not with the harm capable whenever it's present.
Partly thanks to just compute power and tools we have today. Second, we have, as operators of online social spaces, mostly abandoned worrying about how people treat one another, which leads to modern social media as a cesspit compared to what the internet used to be like.
Too long didn't read, or in this case listen. Well, basically, Trammell changed the core of the game so much that although it did lead to some short-term success, it also led to a massive schism that led to the further popularity of free shards. Again, this is both seen at the time just by looking at the shards as they got erected, and the fact that T2A is the most popular world state. Whether
This dragon, this is a swamp dragon, and you could have armor on it, and it would give you, it would actually transfer to the one riding it. So it was one of the, let's say, mid-tier popular mounts. Because it was cheap. It wasn't like you could buy it easily from the bank, meaning from people selling it, tamers basically. And you could easily buy a barding deed, which armored it, and then that gave you a little bit of extra physical protection, I think, or some other protection, depending on the materials used on the barding.
erected, and the fact that T2A is the most popular world state. Whether that's just because of the Trammell that comes after it is arguable, but it shows that perhaps had Ultima kept some of the servers originally to enact the same concept, there could have been a way to retain those players instead of losing them. That being said, I think it's
It was during. So when Feluca and Trammell split, and this happened, people would start designing PvP houses. In other words, they would customize the house in such a way that they could be, for example, behind here, concealed by this water wall, but they could still shoot through, or they would have like places like this, so that you're not affected by or for this design, for example. Yeah, it was visually it was pure vomit. Feluca was pure vomit visually when it comes to housing, because all houses were in places where people could retreat easily to, or lure their attackers or their victims to, and then exploit the house customization to just kill them from safety or to just escape safely.
Unfair to call Renaissance a bad expansion, which sometimes players do. It was actually a response to a lot of player feedback and things worked out for a time. It's just more that in some ways it was unnecessary if more time and thus planning had been put into constructing those aspects of the world. Remember, the game was really rushed. Or if they had plans that were put into action to alleviate the problems much sooner. Well,
So you saw how this guy so something
really
says
rushed.
you is
Or if they
bad
had
here,
plans that
right?
were put in
You is bad. So what happens here is something that was common back then. You would name your pet, your mount, you would name it, for example, fuck you or something. So that if you got dismounted, it would be a taunt for you. That was the reasoning behind that.
into action to alleviate the problem.
Because immediately if you had all names turned on, it would pop, so you would read it. So that you would know that, oh yeah, for example, you could name it like fuck you for dismounting or something. And then, that was cool. I don't fucking know.
Much sooner. Well, of course, I think there could have just been a middle ground.
This beetle was something that crafters and gatherers used, just because it was a pack animal essentially, and a very fast one. So it was preferred from pack horses, for example, and it could hold like a huge weight. And so miners especially would use this to load it with ore instead of like dragging it around like I described earlier.
Why? Well, because we've seen it in games like RuneScape and the entire survival genre, and when all else fails in a synthetic world, you can compare it to ours to find similarities or inspiration.
And this is how you would be when you became invisible.
And well, is crime rampant to the point that society doesn't function like UO was early on? Well, no, of course. And for many of us listening, we can think of a dozen reasons why. PvP and the loss of items will never not be an addictive aspect of virtual worlds and online gaming, but the bad arguments and toxic people who defend it to exist without proper systems. But it won't work that way. That's a world where wolves are just feasting on every other kind of animal, aka gameplay style, and forcing them to quit the game. While many PvPers can wear it as a badge of honor to do this and call those players like Care Bears and stuff like that, there's no place for stuff like that anymore. When Minecraft was one of the most popular PvP games, you have to start to reevaluate things. Maybe just calling people Care Bears because they don't like bad systems is not a good way to bring them to joy.
Oh my god, Care Bear. We used to call people who were intramel Care Bears. I don't even know why. It was just a name that stuck. It was like a contained insult. I say contained because it was like in-game stuff, you would call them Care Bears.
Join the PvP
anyway.
content.
I don't even know why. It's like literally just how.
Many of these games that found success with these mechanics, such as Albion and RuneScape, had the benefit of evolving their systems over many years or just borrowing others. Ultima Online can't really be blamed for the PvP grief saga. Nobody really knew what players were capable of yet, especially without much precautions to stop them.
Some people say, why don't they just shrug it off? And I think the thing that they miss is some people are logging into the world and they say, I'm in a boxing arena. Punching's part of it. And other people say, I'm in a park. Well, the same thing that is totally fine in a boxing arena is way out of bounds in a park.
Although the sub numbers would jump back up, the success of UO wasn't very long-lived. In fact, the sequel, quietly being worked on in the background, was canned publicly March 2001, with the desire for the team to focus again on UO 1, which is what they originally wanted to do anyway, except now most of the original team was gone. This was a crucial blow for UO as a franchise, and Origin Systems as a company, because it would lead to a whopping layoff of over
Now you see why I remember it being cyberish. I mean, now you can see, and I was right.
200 employees, with the remaining members departing to join Destination Games with Richard Garriott. EA's mishandling of UO started from the beginning, and it really shows how bad many corporations like them have affected the virtual world industry. The third Dawn expansion would hit March 27th.
Third Dawn, I believe, is actually the 3D expansion. Oh god, it was... ugh.
2001, and it would bring with it a new 3D engine and client. And although that might seem like a positive thing, it would actually end up being quite hated. Not only
Yeah, it was... I really wanted to like it. I really wanted to like it, but it was... oh my god, it was dog shit. Even you can see even the interface had changed. Like, what is this shit, you know? I really tried to fucking like it, but nah, it was just not you.
did the player base still playing UO not really care for 3D yet, or at all, hence them playing UO in the first place. In many cases, the 3D models were really low quality and low poly, and in different style than UO's actual 2D sprites and art. It was kind of like PS1 graphics, and remember, the PS2 came out a year before. My issue with the client besides those issues was that the performance was quite poor.
Yeah, true.
And it being a bit of a misunderstanding of expansions of virtual worlds. What I mean is that expansions for virtual worlds historically have never been about bringing in new players, but more so, retaining the old ones. I don't know how much of the old player base was even asking for such an update, and yet EA and Origin would somehow, and for some reason, attempt 2 more similar clients that many would abandon just for better custom.
That is a nightmare, is what I described earlier. That this mount is a nightmare, I'm pretty sure.
Clients anyway. Lord Blackthorn's Revenge expansion would drop February 2002, and despite a lukewarm reception being a mostly story-focused expansion, I actually thought that it was quite neat, because it featured the Spawn comic creator, Todd McFarlane, as a writer. After the departure of Richard Garriott, UO was without its helm, story-wise, and that void was felt. The Age of Shadows expansion, which is probably my favorite post-T2A expansion, would add the Paladin and Necromancer archetypes in the form of their additional skills. Anytime new skills were added, I was a fan, as this is how old-school RuneScape has managed to keep its old game still new. AOS also added the Malice landmass, which is where I and many others would put their player housing because the old world zones were very crowded.
That is true. At least it did that. But you know what the problem was with that? That you see this, and you're like, oh yeah, that looks like an interesting landmass, and you know the fact that it's in the abyss is like kind of whatever. And then you would go, and day one it was like house everywhere, houses everywhere. You couldn't walk. It was like overcrowded with houses. It's insane. Which ruined everything that this thing could have done for the game, in my opinion. Except for the skills. As NerdSlayer says, yeah, the skills were a very nice addition and everybody bought it for that. But at the same time, yeah, it was obnoxious. You could not walk like for 1 pixel and there would be like houses everywhere. It was crazy.
The expansion wasn't without controversy, however.
At least that's what I remember.
With many of the fanbase rejecting the new, shiny weapons that would designate the properties that they had attached to them. I personally don't really understand this. I mean, D&D has this as a concept, and remember, Richard Garriott was a mega D&D fan, and even Lord of the Rings has shiny swords. But UO was fairly medieval fantasy and lacked such things, and thus the nerds were angry. It also should be mentioned that during this time, UO would peak at 250,000 subscribers, before dropping down to nearly half of that within 2 years. This was impressive, even in modern times, but EA had their eyes set on more competition to come, and that competition would start shattering even more barriers. Raphcoster's next world-defining virtual world would launch June 26, 2003, repeating though the past issues of UO and launching way too soon. Still, Star Wars Galaxies upon launch was able to reach an impressive 300,000 subscribers in just no time, and even sold over 1 million copies at box price. Star Wars Galaxies best of all was 3D, and had many of the same things that players loved in UO, like vendor merchants, player housing, a lot of build variety, and some major expansions like city governments, the graphics, a popular IP in Star Wars, and later space combat. But they were different games, with Raph electing to focus more on cooperative content and team-based PvP instead. But SWG would be one of the many new virtual worlds to come that would not only chip away at UO's existing population, but further expand the game market and ceiling in a way never seen before. Following the cancellation of yet another UO sequel, this time labeled Ultima X Odyssey, EA would shutter Origin.
Odyssey. So this thing, this is kind of weird because Ultima Odyssey tried to be World of Warcraft. And if you see, like, as you can see from the graphics already, like, we're not even 1 second into the trailer of it, and you cannot tell me that you're not looking at some kind of like proto fucking World of Warcraft, right? So it's interesting. There was a theory that basically, I'm not saying that's the case, okay, but there is a theory, or there was a theory back then, that basically Blizzard stole it, and that's how they ended up with World of Warcraft. Like, literally saw that and went like, yeah, we were doing that instead, or something like that. I don't remember how the theory exactly went. It was a conspiracy theory, right? And I'm not commenting on how valid it was or to what degree it was valid, but, the timing and the look and aesthetics were suspicious to everyone who was playing Ultima, that I knew at least. In my circles, there would be talk that like, oh yeah, they stole this or something. It was weird.
Systems altogether, the studio behind the UO franchise. You can see some of the trailer and gameplay footage here.
Blizzard and getting successful on top of another IP. Yeah, exactly.
And it's bizarre. Yet again, we have something serviceable looking, and even for the time, and yet abandoned outright. Now, perhaps this was because, as many people might not be aware, that WoW might have launched later that year in 2004, but it was playable for many insiders before that point.
Yeah.
So many developers knew that WoW was coming before it came. This very well could have been a reaction to that. But then again, why even attempt it in the first place if you're just going to give up and take your ball home before you even try?
Okay, so his report said more light into it. Okay.
That's why it's much more likely.
But this conspiracy theory did exist. Actually, people, even I myself, like when I first saw this trailer and then I saw World of Warcraft, I was like, wait a minute. Wait a fucking minute.
That EA was to blame yet again.
But apparently now NerdSlayer, from what I understand, actually says or confirms, and I do trust him in that basically they knew, like the developers knew.
Again, for both
in which case it means that, they didn't act maliciously, let's say.
Misunderstanding the genre and how to run a proper video game.
The idea of gargoyles, which you see here, was then transferred into the
game development team. I mean, check out the gameplay. Besides the horrible sounds.
But yeah, you can understand, like, by looking at it, you can understand why people, like, fans of UO were saying that basically Blizzard, like, stole this. Like, stole the aesthetic, stole the thing, That kind of thing. That was the conspiracy theory.
It doesn't actually look half bad. Ultima X was supposed to have action combat, much improved 3D graphics, a much more improved scale. I mean, just check out this fly-around trailer for an example of that. So much more of what could have been for the Ultima series, including the online variants. Sadly, in the end, we never saw another Ultima Online game released, with the cancellation of Ultima X being the final death knell for future titles, it would seem. This is sad because it meant that UO would be phased out, no matter what, due to the passage of time and competition. And that also many players would never get the chance to see the beauty of the game in a more updated format, or even in the older format, just because it was so old. Take Lineage, for example. In the East, it's just as old, just about, as UO. Yet it's still around and kicking, and makes a boatload of money. More than UO does. On top of this, the series of Lineage itself has had like 10 spin-off games and 2 sequels and like 2 stolen projects that became games. I guess I just wish that UO got something closer to that fate. But I guess they didn't have the benefit of NCSoft running things. Just before the launch of EverQuest 2 and World of Warcraft as behemoths, and UO would launch the Samurai Empire.
I remember Samurai Empire. It was the most frustrating time for VP. Because at that point, I don't know if NerdSlayer is going to mention it, at that point it felt like developers just stopped caring about balance completely. And you could end up As if, for example, as if the fact that like parrying mages were so powerful wasn't enough. Now you had the Bushido, and Bushido, oh my god, oh my god, was so fucking OP. It was so broken. You could literally just one shot like six people at once if RNG favored you. It was insane. It was insane. And completely ruined PvP. This completely ruined it. Even though the skills themselves, so Bushido and Ninjutsu, I think. Ninjutsu? Anyway, these two skills were actually really fucking good on their own. And as I said, I was actually a ninja, stealth poison ninja, and I was extremely successful at it because it just naturally complemented my already like super good fucking stealth playstyle that I had, that I ended up with, before Samurai Empire. Um, it's I don't know. They just fucking, you could tell they gave up on PvP completely as well. It's just like, eh.
Expansion featuring the samurai and the ninja
I remember this launch promotion. I remember this launch promotion.
archetypes. Now, fun fact, or not so fun fact, this expansion was led by a later canned Blizzard development for harassment. And, well, it wasn't a very liked expansion either.
No, it wasn't. Mundane's Legacy is the one that allowed you to turn into an elf, and the gargoyle, I think. No, gargoyle was later. This allowed you to turn into an elf, but not a gargoyle. And these guys, I don't remember why this was called Paroxysmus and this was called something else. And anyway, it brought some new champions, which dropped some new stuff. I think some strange dyes for your hair and some shit. Mundane's Legacy was well received. I don't know if player is gonna mention that it sucked, but no. As far as like being in the game and like seeing people in there, people fucking loved this. People loved this, and they loved not the skills so much. They didn't like the new skills that much, which were, it was a casting skill which I don't even remember. It was druidic kinda, but I don't remember the name. But yeah, for they were very weak. They were very weak in PvP as well, as opposed to Ninjutsu and like Bushido, which Bushido especially, like, holy shit. I mean, Bushido. So to give you an example of how fucking stupidly overpowered it was, there was a 2-second cooldown or something that basically boosted your regen to a point where within seconds you could have your full health back, for example, and you could just spam that forever. So you had scripts like just auto pressing that like all the time, literally. You were like, with that and bandages, you were like literally unkillable in fucking. And there were so many combinations, like Paladin with Bushido or Mage with Bushido, or Anyway, it was completely crazy. Theo immediately just picked up on that and just, wow, he was just murdering people left and right. Literally murdering people. There was a skill that allowed you, like, if you parried. So the way it worked, it was like, if you had a two-handed weapon, you had a bonus in parrying. And then if you also had the parrying skill, you increased that even further, right? And so what Theo did, at least for a time, was like he removed. I don't remember exactly what it was that he removed, but something that allowed him. He changed his skills around, and he was prone to getting hit more often. But what that ended doing was triggering the counter attack from the parry. And the counter attack itself had like a chance to like literally insta kill or take away like 90% of your health or something. It was insane. And so if you had like a very hard hitting weapon and also with magical effects like lightning or fireball, or if you poisoned it, like you could just murder like 6 people attacking at the same time, you could murder them. And that strike, that counter strike, did not count towards your auto attacks, which means that like you basically could pull off a massive counter strike, and then due to an auto attack, you just hit them again, they're dead. That's it, boom, done. Like it was so crazy. And Theo specifically combined it with an axe because he also had lumberjacking, which increased the axe's damage, which was already super crazy high. And he was using an axe that had double attack as a special move, as one of its special moves, because weapons had special moves assigned to them. I heard that later they changed that, and you had to select your special. Like, I don't know, they changed it anyway. That's what I heard. But back then, that axe had double strike, which was basically a second strike for free. Um, outside of cooldowns or whatever. And so at that point, as you understand, and it could trigger from the counterattack thingy. So somebody could strike at Theo, and they could immediately receive like a counter strike, the auto attack, and the double strike, and all that with 50% chance lightning, and with massive base damage. At that point, he was just like literally murdering people. And you know what's the worst about this counterattack? It counted against spells, from what I remember. But let's say that one I'm 50-50 on. But I am 1000% sure it counted for ranged attacks. So he could counter an archer and hit them even though, they weren't close to each other. Which was absurd. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Are you fucking throwing your axe as a boomerang? Like, what the fuck are you doing? It was pretty insane. It was pretty insane, honestly. Pretty insane. And usually what he would do, he would then switch to a fast weapon and kill them. Like, if the axe fucking barrage of hits didn't kill them, he immediately just switched weapon to something faster and just like kill them like that. To trigger auto attacks even faster, for example.
Undane's Legacy would feature a current lead developer of Blizzard, Maria Hamilton. This expansion felt like more of UO transitioning into more classic fantasy, which was more popular for the time, with the introduction of the elf race. And while I'm not totally against the inclusion of it, it does seem a bit coincidental that it took nearly 10 years for it to come out, and it came out the year after 2 games came out with elves. Now, EA would do as EA did, and would acquire another company, this time another online gaming giant in Mythic Entertainment, behind hit Dark Ages of Camelot and later on, Warhammer Online.
Yeah, everyone was really happy for that, honestly, or at least the people I talked to back then. They were like, "Oh, damn, Mythic. They acquired Mythic, and now Mythic is gonna work on UO." Everyone was hyped, and then I don't know. It's just
Mythic, after the acquisition, would essentially be put in charge of UO as well, which was a EA property. EA wouldn't learn much with Origin's failure, and they would also screw up Mythic as well. Though at the very least, they had put some people who genuinely cared about virtual worlds in charge of the now fading franchise.
that explosion that you saw there was caused by a conflagration potion. Conflagration potions were used especially if you knew that somebody was stealthing around, because as you saw, they create this like explosive expansion thingy, and they would damage somebody stealthing and then maybe kill them while they're stealthing away or something. People try to use this like against me. To me, it was useless. Like, it never did much to me. I knew exactly what to do, how to stealth away, which animal forms, because ninjutsu like allowed you to turn into various animals, which each of them had certain passive abilities, right? And I knew exactly which ones to use. It was it was insane. It was pretty damn insane. But yeah, no, ninjutsu was like not that popular, just because people didn't want to stealth, didn't want to go into stealth and all that. But I did, and I was fucking taking names. I was taking names, 100%. But yeah, samurai, like killing samurai was extremely difficult even for me. Extremely difficult, honestly.
Franchise in UO. The population had regressed back to around 100,000 subscribers, which was still impressive, but not impressive for what was being shown to be capable by competitors. The whole success poisoning your mind sort of thing, pocket watching, this likely was
They're going towards the blacksmith. There is a
why
blacksmith
EA
shop.
and team kept trying to reach for
I
more
don't know
and
if
more
he's gonna
market
show
share,
it.
and didn't.
But up there, like if you went even further northeast, there would be a blacksmith shop there. That was in Britain, and that place was when way back at the start, people would actually go and set up shop. So essentially, you would have like low-key role-playing blacksmiths, and that's where they would sell their armors, for example. Dude, Ultima was, oh my god, it was so fucking perfect when it came out. Holy shit.
Just accept that they were a niche title without that much shine in the sun, which is perfectly reasonable if you're not going to put out a new game, right? UO would try again to fix his dated client and graphics with the introduction of the Kingdom Reborn.
I remember Kingdom Reborn. It tried again with 3D client. That's true, but I don't remember even how it looks. That's because at that point, I was just not interested myself. I wasn't interested in like any new clients. There was nobody fucking was like everybody after Third Dawn. Everybody just went back to 2D and just never looked back and never fucking cared about new clients and shit. At least, again, nobody that I knew.
Born client. This client instead would go 2.5D, but the problem being, yet again, that the core art aspects were rejected by the player base. And while the client was pretty buggy and not responsive, the UO team promised that the client would only be fully implemented when it reached a majority player usage, but that wasn't true, and it was forced on the player base yet again. The good thing about these two clients was that every time they came out, new and improved community versions would come out. The problem being, yet again, every time the official servers of UO would mess things up, the free shards would just continue to grow, which were already massively popular. The Stygian Abyss expansion would
Stygian Abyss is the one with the gargoyles. Now I remember.
hit September 11, 2008, and would introduce gargoyles to the game and their homeland. You could also now imbue gear, and, well, you guessed it, another new client. But this time the client was only hated at launch because it was buggy and because they delayed its implementation in the first place. The enhanced client is actually quite
I don't even remember that. I think, as I said, I think at that point I had given up completely.
enjoyed, especially amongst free shards where it sees a lot more usage. It allows you to play the new and classic graphics if you choose, with a focus more so on 2D. It just took the game like 10 years and like 6 expansions and 2 failed clients to get one. High Seas was a booster pack
I have no idea what High Seas is. I didn't touch that one.
released October 2010 along
I don't think I did. If I did, I just never saw anything out of it. I just bought it and installed like whatever and then just like never cared. Because all I did was PvP at the same places, so whatever. There is a chance that I had it, but like just didn't care.
alongside with it was supposed to be a set of booster packs released, but High Seas would be both the first and last booster pack. I think that High Seas was a cool update, much like the one that came after it, but it just gets marred because
I vaguely remember this, so I might have bought it and just never took advantage of anything it offered ever, and just it just existed, on my account.
it was kind of overpromised. Now Mythic would continue to run things up until they would also fold, another casualty of EA, when Broadsword Online would take over control February 2014. This would actually be a bit of good news, as UO had been kind of left to the wayside in a abandoned bin for the past couple of years. This way the game would actually get some new updates and have the official servers continue to live. While this would get more brownie points in other virtual worlds, UO really didn't have issues with preservation, because free shards were still being more popular than live servers. This is a large reason why UO fans were unaffected by the unfolding continuing drama of the series, on live, and, well, EA. Had EA and crew known about the possibility of classic servers and the potential of them, they could have been ahead of the curve and retained some of those free shard players and made more money. I mean, just look at classic WoW and old school RuneScape. The final expansion for UO, at least as of 2020,
Yeah, this I have no idea about. This I definitely didn't know.
5 was Time of Legends, and just when you thought that UO wouldn't or couldn't expand their world in a more unique way, they did. It just took them a bit longer than it took Star Wars Galaxies. The expansion would introduce not just new zones, new skills, and new monsters, kind of like all of them did, but more house customization abilities, and even the ability to customize by tile. This feature was a feature that Raph was quite positive of, and even mentioned that he had a desire for UO to have cities on the same scale of Star Wars Galaxies as well, though it never came to fruition. UO, after 21 years of life, would finally go free-to-play sometime following their announcement on April 4th, 2018. Broadsword would also claim to outlaw multi-boxing, which had become a necessity to compete in old-school games like UO. Multi-boxing is when you cloned your client and played on 2 or more characters at the same time. Problem is that they didn't really enforce it. Fun fact, UO was actually supposed to get a punk buster a long time ago, and it never did.
Alright, and now I have to say that when it comes to PvP at least, like what drove away people from PvP eventually or ultimately, no pun intended, was hacking. Hacking was absolutely rampart in this game. Hacking was absolutely rampart. Everybody and their dogs fucking cheated in some way or other, usually in a major way. speed hacks were something that you just couldn't play without, especially especially early on. It was crazy. It was crazy, honestly. It was really bad. I'm not just talking about scripts or anything. It was the things you could do were insane with various scripts and macros and some auto clicking things and like other stuff. Like you could fucking literally make the game play itself and also react to most situations automatically. You could do some like really crazy shit, including definitely. Um, well, I know I sound salty about a game that is like 50,000 years old, but like you could turn invulnerable. You could phase through objects. Like there were like so many issues. Cause somebody to lag as well. Like there was like you can't imagine. You can't fucking imagine.
Endless Journey, though, as it was being dubbed, the free-to-play version, or freemium service, was allowing you to play the majority of the game while having the chance to upgrade to veteran status for more features. But while this was impressive, yep, you guessed it, free shards were even more impressive detectives and offered far more than the live service, whether in terms of the player base, variety, or content. UO Outlands is a perfect
Mondane's Legacy also introduced a quest system. They started introducing quests, and that also kind of, I think I feel it turned people off even more. At least the way they were initially implemented was kind of like ugh.
example of this and would become a behemoth free shard when it would drop September 2018. UO Outlands featured a new massive custom map, brand new dungeons and points of interest, and improved gathering and crafting skills. There's much more, but I'm not being paid by nor asked by Outlands to advertise this. I just wanted to mention it because a lot of my friends play on that server and had great experiences. UO Outlands allows for aging UO players like myself and my friends the chance to play the same game, but with new tricks and new
PVM is what you would know as PvE, basically. It was called initially player versus monsters, not versus the environment, versus monsters.
wrinkles to it, all the while continuing to expand the game in ways that Broadsword, a glorified maintenance mode developer, just couldn't and wouldn't. An example of this is how little Broadsword was actually updating the game from 2022 to 2023, past the maintenance mode updates. Things got so bad that people were wondering when the supposed new server was even supposed to come. But Broadsword was managing more than just one virtual world now, with Dark Ages of Camelot also under their belt, and had very little resources on top of that, and very little staff working on the game. Meanwhile, on Free Shards, which feels like half of this episode, meanwhile, in the next episode concerning Free Shards, another update would come out for the much loved and played Outlands server dubbed Wildlands. More land masses, more dungeons, and more places to live and fight, and much more such as the naval additions that came later on, and then some from live. UO Outlands really is the most expanded way to currently play UO, and features the most active community. It's really a testament to the community of UO, and UO itself, to elicit that level of fandom and loyalty. I mean, it's not like these guys are making bank doing this, they rely largely on donations. That's just pure nerddom, detectives. The strongest force that there is, I should add. UO just changed so many people's lives, and it's still doing that 28 years later, and making people so inspired that they're still innovating on the game design. While Broadsword was slow to move, they would finally strike in a big way with the new Legacy server. The new Legacy server was a truly novel experience, though many players felt like it was poorly advertised because it seemed to advertise more of a classic experience, though it was more of a
Why is it flashing like that?
modern experience and realized version of UO that I will explain. First off, you start by choosing your path from 3 NPCs in a tavern, which feels lifeless and pretty unimaginative, I might add. You then choose a class, which means that the UO skills have been repurposed into actual classes or archetypes that
What the fuck?
you would choose from. And finally, you progress in the game by completing quests, kind of like a classic Deku Mud or WoW or EQ style game, which was nothing like old school UO. Now, I don't have issues with the server personally, besides with how much it was advertised to the classic players in a misleadingly way. But I think that it shows little faith in the UO team, or what's left of them, that they actually have in the core game ideas itself. I mean, technically speaking, New Legacy as a server isn't an MMORPG according to Raf Koster because it wipes and thus lacks permanence. And
It wipes? What?
repurposed novel servers are cool, but it's already what the free shard server and community was doing. But I can't fault Broadsword for trying to do things and novel things, especially when they had such little resources. With such few resources, Broadsword seems unable to do anything more than community teams at this point. Ultima Online is still alive, officially, and on many of its free shard servers as well. But UO never did get those sequels it was supposed to get, and it's been relegated to a maintenance mode now on official servers. Because of that, I think that it's a good time to put it on the Death of Game series, which doesn't just document failures, but also pieces of virtual world history and art. And so, detectives, with that music playing, it means that we have come to an end in this episode, and the timeline has terminated. While this episode was less about the failure of Ultima Online, there are still things that the game could do to improve its lot in life, and things that happened outside of UO and its control that kept it from seeing more success, which is kind of crazy to think about, right? UO could have been the West's lineage, and unfortunately, we only ever got
Yo, what's up with the flatting lately?
one virtual world out
Jesus.
of it. And so, what were some of the clues that led to UO not being so successful as it could have been, and slowly fading away from popularity and the mainstream focus? It was the father of MMORPGs, which comes with its positives and its quirks.
Yeah, because of course it was like highly experimental in every regard.
Fierce competition coming out
That is, I think, the number one reason as well, which then led to like everything else, like being understaffed, underpaid, under fucking everything.
of pretty much just within years. Trammel and the catalyst of free shards. Electronic Arts was clueless in handling Ultima
That
Online.
also,
The OG team just about fully departed and
I
even
mean, of
made
course.
newer and shinier games, shifting into maintenance mode.
I mean, that is like a result of everything else, isn't it?
Time doesn't wait for anybody.
And time, I guess, in the end, you know, at the very end, everything good has to end, it seems. So yeah, after like, come on, dude, more than 20 years, I would say it was bound to happen one way or another, you know?
Not even virtual worlds. Ultima Online is one of the West's crowning achievements. A mixture of ingenuity, talented leadership, and a surprisingly big budget, god-level crunch, and a lot of luck led to the massive genre-defining success of Ultima Online. UO pioneered its own industry it created and helped create other genres in the process. Now, this video is not to take away from its achievements or its momentous impact in the industry, but it's more so to highlight both its impact and highlight how much more of an impact it could have had things been different. I was personally shocked to see that EA's meddling into virtual worlds, full of ignorance, goes as far back as the first coined MMORPG, but paints a bit of a darker picture ahead, detectives. I don't know if hoping that big AAA companies are going to save the day is nearly as realistic as it was, or really ever was supposed to be. Not without the proper talent and vision especially. And that's not to say that the indie industry can just magically fix things either, because, well, they're gonna have a funding issue. Instead, I think we're gonna see a lot more measured approaches with particular markets in mind, as we have already seen for a number of years. Very safe games, as people would describe. Well, up until the next UO comes, yet again, showing everyone, or reminding everyone what virtual worlds are capable of in terms of their scale and ingenuity. Now, until that time, detectives, or, well, until the next case, please, because, well, let's be honest, there's a never-ending stream of cases, new and old, and, well, this is how Tom and I make a living. So please show your support in the comments below, or show support by joining the channel's memberships, or going to our Patreon page. Let me know what were some of your favorite experiences and most memorable experiences in Ultima Online
I can't, if I do that, I'm gonna write a comment that basically breaks YouTube.
below, and thanks for watching.
Damn, that's a good video. Okay, that was very good. That was actually very good. Holy shit. Damn, I would not touch Ultima right now with a fucking 50,000 foot pole, honestly. Let me turn on the light, by the way. I'll be right back. Also, welcome back, Neris, and I'm also back. Yeah, that was awesome. That was actually awesome. Damn, it was interesting to see and to catch up because, of course, the last one expansion I didn't know about, or the legacy thing I didn't even know about. Like, yeah, but or even the Outland server. Would I start like Ultima Online on like a private server right now? No, I don't think so. I don't think like I've played this game for like 17 years, literally. If not 17, then 16 and a half. But yeah, I'm done. But like I had so much fun in this game and so many moments, and it was defining for me completely. It was defining in many ways, including like impacting my real life even like in the sense of like here is a story then, okay, since I shared some stories from the beginning, then I can share some or at least one of them now, for example. So which I think I have brought up before as well. It went to the point where we would be going to school and we would be exchanging messages between us, written on like pieces of paper that we would throw at each other. um, and we would be talking about how we're going to become more successful killers in the game. Anyway, this kind of like back and forth conversation was intercepted by a teacher who then saw that, read what we were writing about, hiding corpses or stuff like that, which was about the game, of course, and casting spell and all that. And she literally just took us to the principal's office and reported us for, well, being basically Satanists and murderers, with the evidence being that piece of paper. And then there we were, 4 or 5 people: Theo, Leonidas, Jim, Lawrence, and somebody else, I don't remember myself. And there we were in front of like, parents and teachers who were genuinely concerned that that we had fallen victim to some cult or something. And there we were with a box of Ultima, showing to them that no, this is actually a game, and describing to them, and they would be like, "What the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean massively multiplayer? Like, what the fuck are these things that you're talking about? These magical words?" And we literally had to show them because they wouldn't believe it. And that was one of the most interesting moments that Ultima gave me, for example, among other ones. Honestly, when I said like I have a billion fucking crazy moments from this game, people I met, friendships I made, uh, a relationship with someone from the U.S., from Florida. If somehow, Rachel, if you're somehow viewing this, hi. My God, it was like holy shit. And with that woman, I would be trading like we would write to each other like letters, actually in real life, and we would include pictures and stuff because, of course, how are you gonna meet ever? And Discord video calls weren't a thing, and so we would do it the traditional way. We would write letters. It was like this game, dude. This game, my God. And anyway, um, damn. Huge. So many experiences. I can't. It would take me hours to just recount everything that I remember that I've done. Um, fighting with like having fights with my friends over like losing in PvP, or it's like, you can't imagine. You can't imagine. There was drama. It was 20 years almost. If you round it up, fucking 20 years. If you round it up, 17 fucking years. So much. So fucking much. Crazy. My God. Anyway, yeah, this has been interesting. I loved watching this with you, honestly. Yeah, what can I say? It's honestly difficult for me to just relay um my experiences other than like, just mentioning funny stuff or stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. Even the fact that, for example, when I said that I was like really good at like being a player killer, a solo stealth player killer, I had like 20 people looking for me for a whole week, and me just picking them off one by one as they were like hunting me down, like in the dead of the night. My God, there's just so many stories. There's so many fucking stories. This game just gave me. I think this game made me want to look for another one like it, which is why I got stuck with MMOs in general, and always looking to relive like something so adventurous, but I can't, and it's never gonna happen because how are you gonna like? It was insane. It was just insane how they did it. I guess you could do it today with a new MMO, but you would have to risk a lot of things, honestly. Now, I don't think there's gonna be another Ultima online experience. Honestly, I'm glad I lived through it. I'm glad I fucking got it. I mean, as a gamer, I'm really happy that I managed to experience this when it was current, when it was relevant and current and modern. And it was crazy. It was so crazy. It was such a crazy experience, such a ride. I still kind of wonder what happened to all the people I knew. Ed, for example, and fucking Dollar. Dollar was fucking insane. And Maya, I believe was her name. And some other people, like lots of people actually. Holy shit. Rob. My god, I had forgotten his name. Rob. Ah, god. Yeah, anyway. And fucking Mayo. What? Oh my god, that guy. That guy was such a piece of shit. Like, and Barbie also fucking Jesus Christ. Anyway, I shouldn't even like talk about that stuff, but yeah, it was pretty crazy, and it was interesting like seeing it. And I do realize that once again, I just forgot my fucking camera turned off, and I never turned it on. But maybe for the better, I don't know, because honestly, and especially right now, I'm in fucking tears, dude. Like when something not takes away, but like when something is in your life for like 17 years, and you remember the people and the friends. Oh my god, fucking O's, dude. I wonder what that guy's doing right now. Anyway, but yeah, it's loaded for me. It's loaded with like emotions and memories. Holy shit. The fucking countless nights spent with real life friends, just playing together and having a fucking hell of a time, just doing whatever the fuck we wanted. Yeah, no, it was fucking great. It was great. It was a great ride, honestly, but not great enough that I would go back now or go on a free server or like fucking God forbid try the officials or anything. I just nah. It's gone. It's gone now. That's it. Rest in peace. But yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. Mhm. I don't even know why a game like this couldn't exist now. I mean, basically, what you would want is no loading, fully open, no questing, no nothing. Add a skill system in there. You're pretty much done at that point. And from there, you just like improve it as you go and balance it, and that's it. Add content, add some expansions, like just I don't see why it couldn't be repeated. I guess maybe it's not seen as a profitable model. I don't fucking know. Maybe the non-consensual PvP would scare people off as well, but would it really though? Because now we have things like Rust or well, not now, but Rust is a thing. Would non-consensual PvP and non-instance open world be such a bad thing? I don't know. And being storyless essentially, and just being a world that you can explore and become anything you want in. I don't know. Like, wouldn't that like be appetizing these days? Anyway, if for some magical reason UO was remade, I would, without hesitation, fucking start it. Because there was no gear creep either. There was no, like you just bought, armor and went and adventured, And yeah, I don't know. I mean, the addition of magical properties on items kind of soured me. I'm not gonna lie. Nobody really enjoyed it, but everyone did it in the end. Everyone just accepted it, I guess. But the early days when the best that you could get is like a grandmaster made, so from a player who was a grandmaster blacksmith, a grandmaster made like set of plate armor, for example, and weapons was the most that you could hope to achieve. And it reduced damage a little bit more, and that's it. I like those days. I really like those days. Things, that for all its fucking simplicity, right? It was so fucking rich and intense as an experience. And the people did. I mean, the people would be a problem these days. I'm not gonna lie. Things would get toxic. Back then, nobody fucking cared. It was just like how known you are, what kind of street credit you got. You got your street smarts keeping you safe from like weird schemes of people who would flag as attackable and then look to fuck you up or something. I miss that shit. I don't know. I kind of miss that shit. It was simpler. Simpler, but also very, very deep. That's the thing. They weren't complex. They were very deep, though. Very, very deep. And the player fucking towns and everything. Damn. I mean, okay, here's another story. Just to give you an example of like how fucking cool things were back then, okay? There was this city called Pax, and Pax was basically a player-made city, right? Just people putting together their houses and customizing them in a way that makes sense, and it was like nicely done, and people there role played all the time, and it was fucking perfect, right? And they had an arena. I think the developers actually at one point came and said, "Okay, you guys have done such a magnificent work that we are making the structures permanent." We're like something like that. They kind of like made it official, like an official city at that point, right? Or village or whatever you town I would call it, I guess. And so they built some stuff for them. Among the stuff they built for them was also an arena. So there was the PAX arena, for example, right? And that was for PvP. That was PvP enabled for the role players to have some space that is safe to actually, have a duel or for role play PvP purposes and stuff like that, right? And they gave them that. And so every week there would be this guy, and his name was, my God, let me fucking remember. Rurik, Rorik. Uh, anyway, some name like that. So it's Rorik or something. And I'm pretty sure it was Rorik actually. And that guy only wore a skull on his face, like a skull mask, like with horns, which was like a default item you could find on the ground because it was just basically a goat head skull mask. And he would wear like a doublet and a body sash and just some trousers and boots. And he had a katana, right? And that guy would appear every week at the arena, and he would fucking destroy everyone on one-on-one duels. He was the best I've ever seen. And I did try to fight him. He was like insane. He was fucking insane. And nobody knew who he was. He never talked. He never said anything. He never fucking said anything at all. All he did was he would show up every Sunday, participate in the fucking tournaments, in the roleplay tournaments. At which point, those tournaments were not just for role players. I mean, I went there. Part of learning how to PvP was through that, for example. And at least that's how it was on my server anyway, on Chesapeake that was. So before I moved to Europa, and he would appear there and fucking whoop ass and then just disappear into the mists. That's it. Like the fucking Legion of the Damned or something. And he literally never spoke to anyone, and nobody knew even what his face looks like because he never lost a duel, so we never saw his corpse. And he never took off the mask. Like, that as an experience in an MMO, okay? Please. I fucking dare you. I fucking challenge you. Top that as a fucking experience. That guy was insane. That guy was insane. And then at one point he stopped showing up. I don't know. Nobody knows why. He just stopped showing up. Eventually, the eventually PAX was, well, abandoned as they stopped playing and all that. Sad. Being a PvPer near the 15-year mark and 16-year mark was a miserable experience because you could see how the population had dwindled completely, and there would only be the usual names, some of which I mentioned, like Barbie and Mayo, and like some other guys. Apple, for example, Apple was like that guy was just made of pure cheats. Like that guy was made of cheats. Like his molecules were cheat molecules. Like seriously, Apple was crazy. Apple was crazy. Uh, but anyway, the point was like you could see the population dwindling. You would see the same names, um, and everything felt like a barren wasteland as well. It was. You would even visit Tramel, for example, and you would see that like there's barely anyone playing. It was so sad, dude. It was so sad. But yeah, before that though, and especially in the beginning, it was such an experience. Like you would walk in town, you're a new player. You would walk in town, you'd see other people, and you would be like, "What are they like? These are people." You would be amazed. I was amazed at that. Like the first day, I was like, "These are people. That you can talk to them, and they're people, like actual other people, who are experiencing the same thing, and they're wondering about you. Like you would meet them out in the forest, let's say, and you would have this moment where you're staring at each other, and you're like, is he gonna try and kill me and take my stuff, or is he like here for the same reason, like to chop wood, for example, or something? There would be moments like that, for example. Nothing ever will come close. Like there's just no way. Nothing ever will come close because nothing offers this context, this potential for context. Because yeah, you're gonna go out in the open world, you're gonna see someone killing monsters, yeah, okay, whatever. But the mystery of like what is that person doing there? Who are they? What do they want there? It was it was pretty crazy. And the fact that there were no loading screens, there was no quest, no purpose. It was you trying to basically make it somehow into something, whatever you wanted, like be a merchant or, you know, be a tamer and sell horses or sell. It was insane. It was literally fucking insane. And all that variety of people's motives created a sort of like system, where you could find people doing their thing, and that could create an adventure for you because you don't know what they're doing, and what they're doing might be something that you're interested in, and then you might start talking to them about it, and they might like show you something that you don't know, but then you might get jumped by player killers, and now you're hunting the player killers. And then you go to town and you bring more people and you're telling them like, hey, please help us. It's like, where are you gonna find this, huh? Where is that gonna happen? In fucking Final Fantasy? Where the fuck is that gonna happen? Guild Wars? It's never gonna happen again. It's just non-replicable. That's it. Anyway, enough fucking having nerdgasms. Very cool game. Gave me like a super cool experience. So yeah, I don't know. I'm thankful for these guys' insane crunch or the other things that led to the creation of this. It's fucking great. What they did is fucking great. I mean, of course, all they have to show for it is people like me telling them, "Hey, what you did defined my fucking childhood as a gamer. What you did defined that," and that's all the things they have right now for this. Seriously, which is a shame, because these guys should be, I don't know, given a second chance. I don't want to say that. That's too cringe to say, but like these guys fucking, influenced the whole fucking industry. uh, and influenced like a fucking fuck ton of people. And to hear that Yoshi P was actually playing Ultima Online, it was one of his like I don't know fucking favorite games or whatever. That was crazy. And Yoshi P, my dude, how the fuck do you go from that to Final Fantasy, my dude? How the fuck do you fucking go from that to having like Final Fantasy 14 the way it is right now? How do you do that? That takes talent or absolute lack of talent. What the fuck? Oh my god. Anyway, interesting though that he was there. Essentially, interesting. Um, I wonder who else, was playing Ultima Online back then. Anyway, pretty interesting stuff though. All right, great video. Damn you, fucking memories, dude. Oh, anyway, this is where I leave you because it's been 3 hours and I don't know exactly. Like, actually, let me check this for the moment. Sorry, one sec. I'm wondering if I should, if we're gonna do fractals, in which case I might switch over to Guild Wars 2 and do that, like stream that a little bit. Otherwise, this is gonna be just like a yapping stream. And if that's the case, if that happens, then I'll just stream more down the line in the week. We'll see. Well, I'll know soon, is what I'm trying to say. Oh god, no, I got too emotional. I got too fucking emotional from this shit near the end. Holy fuck. I still remember when they had changed something with parrying, like the skill parrying, which basically means that you could parry it with a one-handed, two-handed, or shield. And I think what they had changed back then was that like if you had a shield, they super buffed it at one point. And we were at the time it was like I think it was me, Theo, Jim, and Vagelis, I think, and we were just kind of roaming and finding people to kill and loot and take their stuff because that's what you do. That was the life for us. And I think at that point, some people had gotten pissed off again that we were like lurking in that forest, in that part of the forest anyway. And so they jumped us, and there was a lot of them. And the fucking heroic thing about that's like a fucking movie because we're just like going down the road and like just chilling and everything. We have ICQ open because Vagelis couldn't be at my place, but Theo could, I think, and Jim also could, but Vagelis wasn't there, so we were using ICQ back then, and we were chatting on that with Vagelis, and just walking down the fucking path. That's all we did. After having killed, I think, like one person or something, like ganked somebody, and we see these guys just waiting at the crossroads, and we're like, okay, these guys are for us. These guys are 100% here for us, like guaranteed. And we just kind of like spread. We decide to just spread, and some of them follow, some of them follow Vagelis, some of them followed me, and like 3 or 4 people followed Jim. And Jim wasn't talking. He was just like super focused, right? And the rest of us were like, damn, did you survive? Like, blah, 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 this and that. Like, we did survive, in fact, and we did ditch them. Um, and they left us eventually. And all that time, Jim wasn't talking. And we were like, we regrouped somewhere. And remember, Jim was like sitting with us, right, with me and Theo. Um, if it wasn't also Lawrence there. And we were like, yeah, we fucking made it. They didn't kill us. They fucking lost us. And then we're like, Jim, where the fuck are you? And he's like, I kind of like turn around and see him, and he's like super focused on the screen. He's doing something. I see him like clicking stuff, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm still fighting. And we kind of like, I'm like, what do you mean we're still fighting? Where are you? And he says, like, north from where you are, like at the road. I didn't even move. And I'm like, what the fuck? And we all go there. We didn't look at his screen. We just physically immediately went there with him, with our characters. And what we see is essentially there was like a wall, because there was a house, right? Against the wall of that house was Jim, and he was boxed in by like 4 or 5 people or something. And that's why the other guys left us, because they probably also communicated that they got one of us cornered. But it was the wrong person, because Jim had like 120 parring or something, and a new shield that he had just gotten, and a new plate armor. And he was like literally back against the wall with like 4 or 5 people boxing him in and fucking wailing at him, fucking pelting him with strikes, and he was just parrying everything and healing. It was crazy. I mean, don't think it was like for half an hour or something, but it was like for quite a while. And then obviously we appeared. We fucking jumped those guys, saved Jim, took their money, and then we're like, okay, now that we killed all of these guys and we took their stuff, we give them to Jim, because Jim was like the MVP at that point, right? And so we give them to Jim and we say like, okay, keep that stuff on you because you seem to be tough and everything. Keep that on you. His character was called Red Hawk, by the way. I just remembered. His character was called Red Hawk. And we're like, okay, you know what? Take that stuff and safe keep it, because we're close to having enough for one of us to buy a second house somewhere. And it was a lot of gold. It was like, I don't know, 10K, 30K, which was like a lot, you know. And, plus some other stuff that we gave him that wasn't too important, like some looted bullshit from the guys we killed. And, we just continue like walking and whatever, trying to find somebody to kill or whatnot. And Jim was with us. And at one point, Jim wasn't with us. And and we're like, hey, whatever. He probably went somewhere. We didn't think to ask him, even though he was next to us, because we were like, in conversation or whatnot. And at one point, he shows back up, right? But there is a difference, because now he's dressed in like the most OP items. And I noticed it, and I'm like, wait a minute, where did you find this armor? Like, cause that's expensive. Like, it's really fucking expensive shit that you're wearing. What the fuck? Did you loot that off the guys? Like, did we miss some loot or something? He's like, no, I bought it. I just went and bought it right now. And I'm like, where's the money that we gave you for the house? And he's like, oh, I spent it. Spent it on the armor, on the fucking armor. And then, because of course Murphy's Law, right? And then we immediately get jumped by probably what must have been a combination of the guys we just killed plus some more guys. At which point there were way too many. They had brought like a fucking tamer with a dragon. They had bought like... and we all die. And he fucking loses the armor as well. Literally minutes after he fucking got it. That was insane. We were all so mad at him. We were so mad at him. We were like, bro, what the fuck? Like, what would you do? Why did you go and spend the gold? And I remember that like, we were yelling at him to run away because essentially the idea was like me and Theo were like, okay, you should sell it and get the money back. And so we were telling him to fucking run away with the armor because at least then he can survive perhaps, and then we can sell it and get the money back. But nah, they got him and they killed him, and they got the they got the armor and everything. Oh my god, what a fucking stupid thing! What a stupid thing! And like everything was like that in Ultima. Like that game just made you want to log in just to see what the fuck you're gonna do today. What kind of adventure you're gonna get fucked up in. It was pretty fucking intense and awesome, honestly. Fucking Jim, dude, took the money, disappeared, and then was like, yeah, yeah, sure, I'll safeguard your money. Yeah, I'll keep your money safe, and then just spends it immediately on fucking armor. Holy shit. Anyway, I remember another fucking weird. That was the weirdest shit I've ever seen Theo do. And this is a true story, where he basically, so to cast spells, you needed reagents, right? So you needed materials to cast spells as a mage, and he was tight. He was pressed for reagents at that point. Because usually what we would do is like kill somebody, take their money, and then obviously we had to take care of like arrows, bandages, and regens and all that shit. And at that point, we were just kind of poor. So, all reasons that like Theo had on his character were pretty important to us because that was his killing capability, right? Without them, what is he gonna do? Nothing. And so we get into kind of scrap with somebody, like a couple of people, and it's me and Theo versus like I don't know, two or three people or something, and they kill me. But I killed one of them, and then the other one killed me, and one of them also was hunting Theo, who was running away because he wanted to preserve his regions, right? He wanted to preserve the materials as opposed to like fighting like a bunch of people losing everything. And that was logical. I was like, yeah, of course you should. And the thing is that you could find regions on the ground. So because regions were like natural stuff like you find in Skyrim, right? Where you go around, you just pick up a flower or something, and in the same sense, you could find regions lying on the ground in Ultima. And so he would be running while picking reagents and trying to see what spells he could using those reagents. So the battle was like Theo just moving a few times, the other guy just rushing at him. Theo, casting a spell, damaging the other guy, and the other guy would stop to heal. And so Theo would run away, would pick up a regent like quickly from the ground, see what he can cast with like whatever couple of regents he had left and all that. I mean, I think he died in the end. I don't remember if he survived that. He died in the end, but like that was like he went down fighting. He went down fighting with like with every inch of his life. Like he was insane. Just picked the regions and trying to cast something. I think at one point he picked up a black pearl and mandrake root, which I think was what you needed to cast like an energy bolt. And that's why I don't remember if he actually won. I think either he drove the other guy away or died, realistically, but I don't remember quite well what happened. But that's how he was fighting in that instance. It was pretty insane. And there was also another instance where I was like just starting with poisoning, right? I was starting to increase my poisoning skill, but I wasn't there yet. It was really difficult. I couldn't, lots of money for fucking potions to poison my weapons and all that. Like, and money was tight at that point. Um, and so anyway, I'm with Theo because that's the person that we played the most with. And he's on that mage that I mentioned. And so we're in the forest. We kill somebody, which that was the funniest kill I've ever seen in my fucking life. Because literally, what happened was, Theo goes blue, right? Because murders, so killing people, timed out, so you weren't red anymore. So if it timed out sufficiently, you would become blue again, so innocent. But that was by mistake, that was by chance. Honestly, we were just doing more PvE, I guess, at that point. And I was, as I said, trying to increase my poisoning, so, we weren't actually roaming and killing people actively. Plus some other stuff that we were doing, at the time. And, he kind of went blue at one point. And so he goes into town. Because I was like, okay, we need money. And he's like, okay, wait here. So he goes into town, goes into the tavern of Britain, the one on the East End. I think it was near some docks or something. I don't even remember. He goes like, quickly, there's like there's a player killer in the forest. And, you know, kind of like two people followed him. And we're like, where's the player killer? Where's the fucking player killer? So he he takes them to where I was, and he goes like right here, bitches, and starts attacking them, right? And so I also start attacking them because, of course, I mean, I was red, I think, at that point. And at one point we split up or something. He kills his guy, but the guy that I was fighting fucking destroyed me. I wasn't dead, but I was like literally wrecked. And I remember just trying, because every hit that you would receive also lowered your stamina, I'm pretty sure. And so, I was out of stamina, but there was a fallen log on the ground, right? And so, because I was walking in that direction, I didn't do it on purpose, my character just sits on the log. And it's like, somebody's hunting you and you're like so fucking fucked up that you find a log. You put your legs over it and you just sit there with your back turned at the enemy. You go like, okay, fine, I guess I'm gonna die now. And and the guy fucking starts walking towards me, like fucking finish me off. But that's when Theo fucking jumps out and like kills the guy, panic, like literally panic casting on the guy. I want you to remember that I am near the guy at this point, and this guy is about to like kill me, right? And he kills the guy, but I'm sitting in such an angle because of the isometric 3D view, that by mistake his last spell was cast on me, and he killed me. I was like, dude, I just fucking survived this shit. You saved my ass. I'm on the fucking log. I'm just following my mistakes, like my fucking life choices over here. And you kill the guy, and then you go like, okay, you're safe now, and then you fucking kill me. Wow. Okay. Oh my god, I was so mad because I had just survived that fucking shit, and Theo was like, okay, I fucking saved you, but he was still casting and targeting, like clicking. And yeah, he clicked on me. He fucking killed me with a lightning bolt. Oh my god. Oh my god. But okay, I mean, and the problem with that was that like I had to wait, and that was why I didn't want to die because of that. Because back then, if you died under certain circumstances, especially if you were a murderer, or basically if you were a murderer and you died, there was a stat loss period. So you could be put into stat loss, which means that if you take a res, then you lose your skills and stats. Not completely, but like a lot of it. Or enough for it to, you don't want to do that. And for the stat loss period to wear down was like 8 hours. So essentially you would be waiting 8 hours as a ghost. And that's what Theo caused to me in that instance. Oh god. And then I was just a ghost for 8 fucking hours. My god. Anyway, but yeah, thanks for listening to my yapping, I guess. And it's been 3 hours, and I think for just chatting or whatever, it's fine, right? 3 hours is fine, even if you had no camera. Which again, I kind of like. Listen, you have to understand, my mind just pushes it away because it doesn't want to do it. That's the problem. I'm really just fighting myself on this. It's not that I'm trying to stall you. I may joke about it, but that's not really what I'm doing. It's literally my mind going like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like, forget about it, huh? Good, great. Just continue as you are. It's fine. You know. And I don't want to do the cringy thing where I just turn it on for like 5 seconds now. I mean, come on, dude. Um. So yeah, but that's those are the stories. And again, sorry for no camera, but yeah, Ultima Online, dude. That's was awesome. Was just awesome. Everything I did in that game was fucking awesome. Every single moment. A fucking adventure. Anyway, right. So I'm gonna leave you, and if there are fractals later, I might stream it. And you'll see me again throughout the week, obviously. Tomorrow, the day after, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. All right, but for now, though, I'll thank you for watching. And hiccup, sorry, and the burp. And but yeah, for now, I'll thank you for watching, and I'll tell you that there are a few things I want to yap about. We still have that video that I want to watch, like this. Where is it? This thing. I still want to watch this with you, but I don't think I'll do that now. I'm in way too good of a mood to actually just go through what potentially might trigger my fucking disgust of like natural death, I guess, of old age. I'm not ready for that kind of mood right now. So this one gets its own stream. Maybe tomorrow, actually. Um, yeah. For now, I'll either see you a bit later for fractals, or as I said, the day after tomorrow, or something like that. Definitely on Saturday, though. You're gonna definitely see me on Saturday. So yeah. All right. Thanks for keeping me company, and thanks for watching. And I hope you found it interesting. Um, yeah. If you missed Yo, if you missed Ultima Online, then my condolences. And if you were there, high five. It was a really cool experience. Uh, right. So with that, I will leave you for now. Kisses and take care and stay safe. Bye bye.